Mic's on.
Mic's on? Oh, my mic is not on. There we go.
Yeah.
Did the Senate decide?
Okay.
They released. Oh, they did. This is how it goes down. Okay.
We're back on the record. Item number 18, 30-12BZ, 14241 Roosevelt Avenue, Queens. What? We did them. Back of the room.
Okay.
Hi, Eric Palatnik. We're requesting an adjournment of, probably if we could submit in 6 weeks or even 8 weeks would be great. We're just discussing the board's comments at the last hearing.
Okay, so does that mean mid-February?
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Okay, so submitting on, say, the 10th of February, is that good?
That's fine.
For hearing on the 24th?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Item number 81. Item number,
That bad?
item number 1981, 12BZ, 9801 Metropolitan Avenue, Queens. Wait.
Eric Palatnik. It does feel like number 81, though. We had requested an adjournment on this matter. We have most of our submission done. We just got some last few items. So if we could submit in maybe the first or second week after the New Year's would be fine, whatever fits the board's calendar.
Okay, so submit on the 13th for hearing on the 27th?
That's great.
Is that good?
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a busy.
January 27th?
Yeah.
Okay, we're switching, oh no. Item number 20, 174 13BZ, 2449 Morris Avenue, the Bronx.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. We put in a submission. I don't think it was complete. We had someone at the executive session yesterday. It appears, what I understand from the board wants the fire alarm installed before they want to act on this application. So,
Correct.
given the schedule that we submitted and the fact that we're already, I believe, about 2 weeks off that, I think we're looking for some time for this installation to be complete, probably about mid-February,
Okay.
if all goes as planned.
Okay, so then how about a submission on, submission on the 10th is probably too early of February?
Might be.
Okay, so submission on the 20, you want to do late February? Is that better?
Sure.
Submission on the 24th of February for a hearing on March 10th?
Okay. Thank you.
Speakers? Did we have someone in German? Are there any speakers?
Sorry?
Any speakers?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any speakers on this item?
No, right?
Okay.
All right.
He didn't say his name?
Okay, we're going to switch the calendar up. We're going to item number 28, 24514BZ, 1601 1623 Avenue J, Brooklyn.
Sorry, which,
Good
sorry, tell
afternoon.
me again, the item number, it's
28.
20?
28.
No, but it's the BZ number.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said 2514BZ.
25.
Did I just say that? I'm
You
sorry.
did, but I didn't. have a chance to
1601
write
Avenue
it.
J.
Hi, sorry, it's just out of order, so.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Lyra J. Altman, Law Office of Lyra J. Altman. First, I'd just like to say thank you. We appreciate your modifying the schedule to allow our architect to be here today. I know you had a few questions for him. In addition, we do have with us the woman who wrote the expert needs report. She is here to answer any questions that you have. We also have a number of speakers, some of whom stepped out but will be back shortly. We will hopefully not have most of them speak. We are going to try to limit our time as a courtesy to everyone else behind us on the calendar.
Thank you.
I would like to read one statement, though, from somebody who had to leave, unfortunately. The statement reads, "Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and Commissioners. My name is Ronald Towell. I have been a lifelong resident of Brooklyn, having lived in the Gravesend Midwood neighborhoods for all of my years. I have had the privilege of receiving my entire education through the public education system of the City of New York. Having begun at PS 215, continue on to Booty Junior High School, and then on to Brooklyn Tech and Brooklyn College, and finally receiving a Bachelor of Architecture from the City College of New York. As a result of the good fortune that the City of New York has afforded me, I've always endeavored to give back. As such, in addition to serving in various community-based organizations, such as serving as the co-chair of the Sephardic Community Federation, and as a board member of the Yeshiva Flatbush, and as a board member of the Sephardic Bikur Cholim, I have been and continue to be a board member of the Community Board 15, where I serve as vice chair as well as co-chair of the Zoning and Variance Committee. For the last 87 years, the Yeshiva of Flatbush has continued to provide a premier parochial yeshiva education to its students. I am proud to say that all 4 of my children have attended the yeshiva, although they are now married with children of their own. Its graduates have gone on to be leaders of their families, their communities, their chosen fields of endeavors, and more. Many of our graduates have received worldwide recognition in the form of many coveted awards and grants. The high school was founded in 1950 with its new building having been erected 50 years ago in 1964. The yeshiva sets a high bar for its students and continues to foster exemplary achievement year after year after year. And now, through 100% of its own financial resources, without an iota of government support or assistance, the yeshiva has a compelling need to expand its physical plant in order to keep pace with the ever-increasing demands of today's rapidly changing world, whether it be in the areas of technology, the arts, or sciences. The Yeshiva High School has always been a good neighbor for 50 years. It pledges to continue to do so, beginning with its desire not to request any more space than what it has determined to be its minimum needs. I respectfully request that the Honorable Commissioners will see fit to approve the application that is currently under consideration. It will not only be a meaningful investment in our children's academic futures, it will also be a significant investment in the community and in its future as well. So that was from Ronnie Towell, who, as you heard, is the co-chair of the Community 15 Zoning Committee. In addition, I just wanted to comment on 2 things. There was a question regarding the space overlooking the adjacent property. That was actually a natural result of setting back for the neighbor. It wasn't created to have space outdoors. It was created solely to provide the additional space. And when the building got set back, naturally a setback was created. And second of all, as far as the difference between the occupancy on the plans and the number of students that you were seeing in the expert needs report, the plans were actually based strictly on the exiting requirements for building code, whereas the school study was based on their practice with schools and industry standards, which is a slightly different way to look at things. We, of course, have to look at the standards of the space that are needed for the students, not how many people we could technically be allowed to stand in that room.
Mm-hmm.
But without further ado, I would like to introduce the person from Brain Spaces who prepared the expert needs report. And Amy, I cannot pronounce your last name. I apologize. Amy Yurko.
Czechoslovakian. I believe it started with a J originally, so I'm glad it's a Y. Hi, again, there were a few other questions that we heard that you had about that you voiced yesterday, and I know some of them have already been addressed. One of which, I think the key one, is about the square footage regulations and how we measure the size of the school compared to those regulations. And well, we, at Brain Spaces, we work around the country and throughout the world and have yet to actually find any regulations on the size of schools. However, we have written some of those standards for various states throughout the nation, and we understand that some school districts, like the public school district in New York, has space guidelines that we can use to reference, as you will, to make sure we're kind of in range. And so we also have statistics on national averages for sizes of schools and sizes of spaces and grossing factors and things like that that we sort of use as a check and balance to make sure we're in range. And we also can sort for whether it's a cold climate or an urban setting, and so we can again be more accurate in our comparisons of those numbers. So in all of the all of the parameters that are proposed for the scheme, they are all within range. All of these guidelines do give ranges, and we're all within range, if not a little bit below range, because of the tight urban situation that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're going to submit those kinds of ranges. You can submit that. You know, a classroom ranges between this and that, and laboratories between this and that. I mean,
certainly, we certainly have that data, but so that the panel knows, we were within range for all of those.
Okay, great.
Another of the questions, should I just go through the
Yes,
questions
please.
you voiced last? And another one of the questions was about the large spaces included in the building. And we were a bit unclear of what you would like to understand or know about the large spaces? You mentioned 3 or 4 of large spaces in the school.
I think that was probably my question, and I was just wondering, with the addition of sort of this auxiliary gym and repurposing of the old Beit Midrash, and then you've got a new 250-seat Beit Midrash, I'm wondering if there was any ability to make the new portion a little bit smaller, because now you've got kind of like 2 big spaces that could be used for students to gather, and probably in the auxiliary gym, you probably have enough room for all 250 kids.
Certainly.
So the question, it wasn't really clear to me whether or not there was, the ability to kind of shrink the new area a little bit.
Sure, it's an excellent question. Actually, that's so. Thank you for asking it and clarifying it. The issue there is in terms of simultaneous use, and because of the program, for example, serving women and men students in separate PE classes, for example, that changes the requirement perhaps over a school where that would not be the case. And so it's more about simultaneous use than anything else. And right now they're planning to use the building at a pretty high utilization rate, at least compared to those national averages. And so I think by eliminating or reducing the functionality of any of those spaces would adversely impact the schedule and the ability to serve the various programs that are being offered through the building.
So at any given time, all 3 of those spaces could be used to their maximum abilities.
Exactly. And again, they're proportioned for the ability to offer various groupings and various activities in there. So it may be that the simultaneous use might be a reconfiguration of the space. In other words, there's some operable walls and some things that like that we're including to allow for that additional flexibility as well. But yes, they're planned for worst case, and to try to illustrate that, even though we've shown you four solutions in the handout, we actually had 5. The first one was a sort of wish list, and the proposed scheme, the one we're hoping for, is actually reduction already from the wish list. And so we've already feel like we've sort of minimized the spaces as much as is possible within the realm of what the curriculum and programs want to be. So it wasn't, the proposed scheme is not just the everything wish list. We did already start to look at ways we could economize on various spaces.
Any other questions?
Well,
Yes.
My question was, I guess, I'm not sure if Ms. Altman tried to answer my question with her statement on the occupancy rates on the drawings versus the need. But my question was that if you had, for instance, needs of 30 of classrooms that can accommodate 30 students, and I see on the plans classrooms that could accommodate as much as 67 students, couldn't those classrooms be repartitioned in such a way that space could be put aside to, for instance, move the guidance offices over from the new building into the existing building, and then maybe save a floor on the new building?
Wow, a really terrific question as well. That is more of a function of, again, the code requirements for life safety and exiting, and so some other things like toilet counts and things like that require that you take the square footage of the space, divide it by a square footage number depending on the use of that space, and that gives you a maximum occupancy. But for educational spaces, we've found, again, nationally, if not internationally, that those space requirements for calculating code are way different than what is actually needed in practice. And particularly now with, we have trouble comparing it even to 10 years ago because of the technology and maker spaces and the interactions and the activities that are required of high school students today are even different than 5, 10, 15 years ago. So we're seeing that there's, even though technology is getting smaller, thankfully, there's still the need for space to do interactive projects, to do multiple kinds of groupings. We don't have kids sitting in rows staring at a board as much as we did in the past. And so I think those numbers for code are a little out of date, but we still know that we need to comply. So we try to document that so we can make sure we're covering all of our bases.
Yeah, some of that is just a kind of the presentation. You're actually answering two different questions with the same drawings. One's a building code question, and the other is programmatic needs question. And
It's a little
I
unclear.
think what I've seen is other applications where the classrooms are in line with what you're proposing. It's just that you didn't provide the standards like they do. And your report was excellent, by the way, but it's just that you would show an image of a room and then not say that this kind of a room ranges in size between this and that, that kind of
I
thing.
think that's a really excellent suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I had just asked about the need for the terraces overlooking the residential spaces. And I know Ms. Altman said that it's a setback, but that doesn't mean it has to be accessible.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
there's no, on that third floor, there's 4,200 square feet of terrace.
Sure. I want to also just mention that the shorter or the narrower of the two is directly accessed from the art rooms, and that having the kids be able to go outside for art helps justify that they're not on the ground floor. So that
Well, they could
there's-
go to the front of the front terrace, correct?
To the what?
There's a terrace along the
Okay,
side
gotcha.
yard.
If the side terrace is something that concerns your board, I've already gotten the approval from the client. They'd be happy to change that so that it's not an accessible space.
I think it was, we had received something in writing from the adjacent residents that,
They've already agreed to make that change, and we can modify the plans accordingly.
okay.
Okay. Are there any speakers on this item?
Possible, I'd like to let Rabbi Linfield, I should say, from the school present, if that's okay with your board.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you would like to do that before before the
Please.
speakers? Okay, that's
Acceptable
fine.
to your board.
Well, a good segue because I'd like to talk about our role as a neighbor and to thank the board and our neighbors for the opportunity to present this application. I'm Rabbi Seth Linfield, the Executive Director of the Yeshiva Flatbush, and we look at ourselves as we train our young men and women to lead lives of intellectual discovery, integrity, and service, to be neighbors. And we're not just two Nobel Prize winners and 12,000 alumni leading the arts and sciences and commerce and nonprofits, but we've had 50 alumni that have returned to teach in our school. It's part of our mission to be intertwined with our community. By the time a senior graduates, he or she will have performed 120 hours of community service, with many doing significantly more than that. When Hurricane Sandy struck, it was our young men and women that were on the front lines for days, helping all those in need, irrespective of religion, race, or ethnicity. While we're proud of our graduates who matriculate at selective colleges outside of New York, a significant number of our graduates, a majority, go on to the different city university colleges and other New York colleges, and upon completing colleges, many of our Yeshiva of Flatbush graduates elect to live in Brooklyn, raising their own families close to parents and grandparents. The subject of this application is an expansion immediately to the north of our current high school building on Avenue J and East 16th Street. Governor Rockefeller participated in the groundbreaking for the current building in 1963. Except for recent internal renovations, the high school building has not been touched since. The expectations for our graduates are different today than they were then, and we believe, consistent with all the programming evidence in front of you, that the new portion is designed to integrate seamlessly with the adjacent commercial, institutional, apartment, and residential properties. We are forming a community advisory board, and we will notice all of our neighbors so that our neighbors can raise and we can redress any issues relating to our construction or use of the property. From what we have learned so far, the items likely on the first agenda do not directly relate to our petition or to zoning writ large, but nonetheless, we're happy to talk and hear our neighbors and get things done. We will be holding the first meeting of this Community Advisory Board on Sunday, January 11th, 2015, at 10 a.m. We believe that before us is an extraordinary opportunity for Brooklyn to continue to offer an exceptional national-level Jewish high school, and that a strict application of the zoning regulations will prejudice our students and school and community and harm the public good. And in that light, we thank you for considering our plan as we set it forth, for hearing us today, and we request the approval of our plan.
Thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Noel Kernan, Chair Perlmutter and members of the board. I'm here today to speak on behalf of my mother-in-law and father-in-law, Sybil and Herbert Paley, seated over there, and make a statement on behalf of their son, Michael Paley, who could not be here today. Dr. and Mrs. Paley live at 986 East 17th Street, next door to the proposed building. They have asked me to reiterate their objections to the yeshiva's application. While the Paleys have several concerns, the objection that affects them most strongly and personally is the height and length of the proposed building. Since the yeshiva's lot is deeper than the Paleys' lot, by eliminating most of the rear setback, the new building will extend the entire length of the Paleys' property, essentially walling their backyard in with a 43-foot height building. The third-story setback does not seem sufficient to diminish this impact. The Paleys' backyard has cherry trees, pear trees, rose bushes, lilacs, and is a source of great pleasure to the Paleys. It is not clear to us why the one-story connecting structure cannot be truncated or other changes made to the design so that the portion of the building abutting Paley's property can be lower and further away from them. We are also concerned that the board may not fully appreciate the impact of the building on the character and aesthetics of this particular block. While the building is consistent with the height and type of building on parts of Avenue J, and the height of the apartment building on Avenue I and East 17th at the other corner of this block, it is inconsistent with the character of East 17th Street. Like many areas of Brooklyn, the commercial and institutional buildings are on the avenues, and the side streets in between the avenues are beautiful residential blocks. The proposed plan would essentially extend Avenue J nearly halfway into this beautiful residential side street. Yesterday, our neighbor Charlie Wiener, the resident of 987 East 17th Street, asked me to convey to you that he vehemently opposes this application. He had planned to be there but had a work emergency. His primary concerns are that the damage to the character of the block and the failure of the school to provide parking and street congestion around the yeshiva have been a huge problem. And now, finally, Michael asked me to state that he's sorry he couldn't be here in person with his parents today. He has tried to summarize his parents' objections to the proposed plan in the letter submitted to the board on December 2nd. On December 3rd and 4th, he spoke at some length with Seth Linfield, the executive director of the yeshiva, and with the yeshiva's attorney, Lyra Altman. They helped him better understand at least some of their design decisions. And they also expressed a willingness to modify plans in a manner that will serve their needs and will be more sensitive to my parents' concerns. We haven't yet had an opportunity to fully discuss specific items in detail, but I believe the conversation thus far has been productive, and we will continue to work with them in coming weeks in good faith to find a resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one question. The house to
Right next door.
right next door on 17th Street?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You gotta come up to the mic.
Maybe bring the mic to her? Yeah, maybe bring the mic to her.
Thank you. Okay, we have lived in the same block with the yeshiva for 40 years, and for the most part, we've all been very good neighbors to each other. We sent our younger daughter to yeshiva, and we love to see these young students going back and forth. We don't like the idea of having the yeshiva practically wall our property in. We're the very next house. There were two houses between us and the yeshiva. And the yeshiva bought those two houses, and actually, they would have liked to buy ours. But it's our home. It's where we raised our children and where we hope to stay. So we really wish to continue our amicable relationship with the yeshiva, but we feel they need to make some changes so they don't change the character of our block and the character of our house, which right now gets a lot of sun and we enjoy. And we also, you know, we've had children and grandchildren in the backyard, and it's very sad to see it completely walled off. So I thank you for the careful attention you're giving to this matter, and I'm going to let my husband speak. Here's the mic.
Thank you. You have it?
Hello, I'm Dr. Herbert Paley. My wife and I are the residents of a house on 986 East 17th Street, which is exactly adjacent to the northern of the two lots which the yeshiva has purchased, which formerly contained private houses, and the lot next to us has been empty for some time, since the house that was there was demolished. There have been some suggestions we've made as to the variances that the yeshiva is asking, and we'd like them to be the variances to be curtailed to nearer the minimum requirements for the number of students they're having in their school. We'd like to have a variance that would not permit the yeshiva to build a short setback and then a 40-story building to the very end of our property. We think that could be shortened so we could have some sun. And we also believe that they could put a second story on the projection of their Avenue J building, which I think they claim that they don't have the architectural support for a second story, but that second story could be added to their proposed joining structure to the first building on East 17th Street. And the building on East 17th Street could be made larger toward East 16th Street instead of using all of the territory facing our apartment to have it 147 feet back. So these are possible proposals that should be taken into consideration by the yeshiva and their architect. And we feel that they could do very well for their students with a decreased allowance, decreased variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Saul Goldbaum. My wife Hannah is with me. We're the next door neighbor of Dr. and Mrs. Paley. I can tell you we're on the block for about 13 years. Overall, I've said this to the rabbi, we have a very good relationship with the school. This particular, the disturbance that we have with this particular issue is until Dr. Paley's son sent me a packet a week ago, we had no idea of the scope of the job that the school was proposing. They did have a letter go out that there's a local community board meeting. We were not able to attend. We thought with the relationship that we have with the school, we would have the courtesy of someone ringing our bell and saying, hey, this is what we're proposing to do to a very residential block. And it's not a commercial block, it's a residential block. I invite anyone on the board to come down, you'll see what we mean. It's a beautiful, beautiful block. They bought these two houses 5-6 years ago. They did own two properties on Avenue J that they could have clearly taken and built on a commercial avenue, pretty much, and take care of all their needs on the Avenue J and not ruin a residential block. What they chose to do is to trade those two houses for one of these properties and gave a substantial sum of money in addition to purchase the house adjacent to the property, and that is a residential block. I have no problem with doing that if that's what you want to do, because it looks aesthetically nicer to have a campus. We're talking about high school students here, and I don't believe it's a problem for high school students to have crossed a short block, and I don't think it should come at the expense of the block. It's my personal opinion, that's why I'm stating it. The character of the neighborhood, they allude to, I happen to have gotten a copy from Mr. Paley of the submission by the attorney. The character of the neighborhood is not at all what they're claiming it is. The character of the neighborhood is very, very residential, as someone said before, I think it was Dr. Paley's son-in-law, that you have on Avenue J these huge properties, and that's absolutely correct. Come down the avenue, you'll see that for the most part, there's no it goes one property, 100 feet or so, into the individual blocks, and that's it. It doesn't go a third or a quarter into the block like they're proposing here. They're proposing a huge edifice in the middle of the block. They're saying it's a one-story that's almost 20 feet tall, which is almost as high as 2 stories of a regular house. And then, of course, going up to second and third stories, which are going to be higher, I believe, than any of the houses on the block. I propose that they should go ahead, and they have plenty of room off their current existing building. They have an auditorium that's a 1-story auditorium. They can go ahead and take that down and put up a 4-story building next to it, and have no problem to accommodate most of the square footage that they're looking to accommodate. And I understand it may not be as cheap, but then again, that's what you have to do if you want to go ahead and expand your school to this size. I do also, and I did bring it up to the rabbi before, and I could say, I have to say, it's not fair if I don't. We had a very good conversation for about an hour before. This is the first conversation that we've had. And he did suggest that we are going to have this meeting on January 11th, and I can tell you that the neighbors, I'm sure, will be very happy to have such a meeting. And we look forward to trying to work, as I said before, and Dr. Paley said before, we have a very good relationship with the school, at least we thought we did, and we'd like to continue that. But at the same time, it shouldn't come at the expense of ruining a block. They have plenty of square footage to go ahead and build off their existing building without coming too far into the block. Certainly, they can match it up to the 4-story building that they have. Additionally, Touro College, who has a building across the street, which is basically the same 100-foot lot that they have currently in their building, has a large parking area underneath. I brought this up to the rabbi. A lot of the children from the school come by car. They have a very high, it seems like some of these kids have a lot of money, have very nice cars. Young kids in high school, they tend to block driveways all the time. We did bring it up, and the rabbi did suggest that we could work out something. Hopefully we can. We do have a major problem. We've spoken to many of the people on the block, and unfortunately, we're not that many in numbers because it is a residential block. There are not that many houses on these blocks, and we cannot compete with a school that has hundreds of students to have our proper representation. But the reality is, because it's such a nice, beautiful block, and we don't have that many neighbors, it's really a residential block, and we'd like to try to keep that format. Finally, I think that's important to be aware. They do allude to several things. I have to say, I read this last night for the first time, but and I did bring this up. They claim that the reason that they're entitled to have this waived is a uniqueness to the property, and they address the issue that it's a yeshiva, and therefore they're entitled to have students that live. They can walk to the building to pray, etc. I challenged the school, and I said this to the rabbi. I'd love to see the enrollment of your children. I can guarantee you that a very, very small proportion of the children that go to this school are within walking distance of this school. And when I brought it up to him, he said, well, they come by transportation. And I have no problem with that. Go ahead and build the biggest school you want, but don't do it on the cost of our block and our area. This is not a school that's a community school. If you're busing and wherever they're coming from far out. And again, I'm not somebody, I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I'm proud to have a school on the corner. I'd love to have the school at the corner, and I don't have a problem. Let them build whatever edifice they would like. but they should build it and be considerate in that sense to the neighbors, to build it near their current school, which is already extending beyond all the other corner properties. Let them extend it as far as they need without, protruding into the block, and I think that would alleviate a lot of the Paley's issues, and like they said, they're there for 40-some-odd years, they love the block, they're tremendous inspiration to us as neighbors as well. So I
Okay.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other speakers on this? Hi. So could you actually respond to some of those comments that, this is the first time that we've had neighbors?
I actually just wanted to hand this up as well. This is support letters and a petition from people in the community as well.
Okay. This is the first time we've heard from neighbors, so I actually didn't realize that there were neighbors who were concerned about the proximity. Could you just, maybe the architect could also respond to this? For example, why couldn't the Beit Midrash just be slid down? It's linked along that corridor. Why can't it just be slid?
Daniel Huberger
further
is
down?
coming up to the podium. He is
Yeah.
the architect from Datner on this project.
State your name for the record.
My name is Daniel Huberger. I'm a principal with Datner Architects. We've been architects in the school for a few years now. We've done a number of interior renovations. We were part of the master plan and part of this proposed addition to the existing building. So your question is, why couldn't the Bet Midrash be slid down a little further to the south? So the first thing I would like to take a little step back is when we designed this addition, we actually designed it with the character of the block in mind. Now, we realize that it will be a change to the block. The portion which is on 17th Street, which is adjacent to the Paley's house, which is the Bet Midrash, is actually an as-of-right structure. It corresponds to all of the bulk and massing limitations, with the exception, you're right, of the side yard setback between the Paley's property and the school. You've seen from the configuration of the lot and the limited space that we have on the lot that the various side yards and restrictions really limit the as-of-right potential on the block. So the scheme which we have presented here, we thought would defer sufficiently to the neighbors in that the height of the mass on 17th Street is kept low. It's actually lower than the adjacent house, so that the house continues to get sunlight. Further back in the lot, which is on the R5 side of the lot, it does rise to a 3-story structure, which is a total of 43 feet in height. However, as you know, on the top story, we have set it back, I believe, to the required setback line as a way of providing light into the rear yard of the adjacent house. So that is basically the concept and the idea behind this addition. And I think in the rendering that we have provided to you on 17th Street, you can see clearly that on the 17th Street side, the volume of the new building is very much in keeping with the scale of the block, and the architectural expression of that volume, which is very fine and very textured, is, although not the same as the adjacent houses, is, we believe, consistent with the character of the house. On the 16th Street side of the block, it is not quite a through lot, so there's a small triangular buffer area, which is planted with trees, which will remain. It is not part of the school property, and as you can see in the rendering that we've provided, the building will be, at least during the months where there are leaves on the trees, practically invisible from the street.
From that side, right. But so to go again, talking about the Beit Midrash, which is only 8 feet away from the property line, why couldn't that structure because everything is lined up on sort of a chain,
Correct,
right?
correct.
Why can't you just slide that mass down to be the appropriate distance from the property line? We could talk about the other building, other portion later.
I think conceivably that's something that could be studied. It is much more, it's a little easier to build a building which is rectangular. It also provides a larger break in between the existing auditorium, which is on the corner of Avenue J and 17th Street, which is quite a large mass, and the new addition. There is a break between the two. There is a courtyard that faces 17th Street, which will be planted, which we think it basically serves as a very sort of generous front yard. And what we were trying to do is to make that courtyard a generous space so that it has programmatic use, but also that it provides a break between the large-scale building on Avenue J and our new building, which steps down towards the scale of the balance of the block. But it is something that could conceivably be studied.
Because you could afford to lose 10 feet or something like that, moving it down, right?
It's something that could be studied.
Right, okay. Any other suggestions about?
I actually had a comment about that as well. Just to echo what the chair said, there might be some actual utility in moving the Beit Midrash down, because you might have the opportunity then to maybe have some shared lobby space, as opposed to having then to create two separate exiting patterns for two large structures. But on the other hand, looking at where the library is in that section, on the cellar level, you don't utilize the cellar, your ability to have a cellar on that side. You've got, mechanical and storage space
Right.
on the Beit Midrash side, but on the library side, you haven't utilized potential for additional space in your cellar. And I'm wondering, did you take a look at that? Was there the ability to put some things maybe sort of halfway down and then only have, instead of having a 4-story structure, having a 3-story structure? Did you take a look at that?
Yes, of course we did, because we tried to minimize the bulk of the addition. When you look at the plans, you can see in the existing building, very unusual for a school, but it has 2 basement levels. It has an enormous amount of subgrade space.
Right.
And the problem from a programmatic point of view and a functional point of view is that there are many functions and many spaces in the school that, for understandable reasons, cannot be below grade. You cannot really put classrooms below grade, expect the students to concentrate and focus. So all of the functions that we're currently showing above grade are really functions that need daylight. The existing building has approximately almost 50% of its space below ground. So in the new building, there's somewhat less. Overall, it's still 30% of the total programmatic area is below ground. The things that we have below grade are things that can go there. The cafeteria, the gymnasium, a lot of the back of house space, storage, utilities, things like
Music
that.
room.
Music room.
You've got the orchestra room in the
Right.
basement.
So we do have a few classrooms down there already, right?
For some of us who like to sing, singing in the cellar is not always the best thing that we like, but.
There you
I
go.
totally
We'd love
get
to add a 4th floor to the building, but we did put some classroom spaces below grade. But we're trying to limit it to what we were showing on the plan.
But I think what Commissioner Hinkson might have been getting at there was, for example, if the library was somewhat depressed, that would reduce the overall height of that portion of the building. So not a subterranean library, but just sort of, 3 feet down, something like that. Then the study rooms would then have access to light. They wouldn't be clear story windows. You'd be dropping it to some reasonable point below sill level. And then and it's not so much the issue of the R5, but it's because you've got that one portion that's protruding into, the R2? That's the issue there. So maybe you could take a look at that, because you're not taking any advantage of excavation on that side.
Right. Well, by introducing, let's say, a half level to the school, by pushing it down, it really starts to complicate some of the circulation and the egressing. All of these paths have to be basically accessible ones. So it either means putting in a lot of ramps, which will use up a lot of space. It's a little more complicated than it might appear at first. I believe, however, based on the comments that we heard today, that the issue is more on the R5 side of the block rather than the R2, which again, as far as the height of that goes, is compliant. It respects the the sky planes and the maximum heights. You have pointed out the variance, which is the side yard, and as I said, that's something that I think we could study.
I mean, I think one of the reasons of looking at the bulk is because it's a way of dealing with the side yard.
Right.
And, the size of your rooms, I understand based on the programmatic analysis, that's how large those rooms are, unless there's another place to put them, another way of arranging them.
Right.
I see kind of there's a problem with, on that part, reducing the side, or increasing the side yard. So if you instead reduce the mass there, maybe you'd end up having the equivalent effect, right? That's why looking at the massing. Whereas the R2 portion, where the Beit Midrash is and where that student commons area, that could easily come away from the side yard, and that might actually solve a lot of the problems, but that might, you still have one classroom and 2 toilets, maybe those could relocate, don't know, not for a school, but the one classroom. Yeah, maybe there's a way to pull more of the mass than just the Beit Midrash.
Right.
But reach across the corridor, pull more with a little bit
Right.
of a switch.
I
It's a different
think
design.
many of the suggestions that you have are good ones. I think eliminating a story from the building would be unrealistic as far as satisfying the requirements of the program. But if it's a question of a few feet in the north-south direction and perhaps in the height, I think those are things that could be studied. And I understand from the school, they've had some preliminary conversations with the neighbors, and I think that's the sort of thing we could address with them.
Great, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Steve? If we could just also just talk quickly about the parking issues also, like the traffic issues, how students arrive here, how the busing works, where the buses go when they drop off, et cetera.
I believe Rabbi Linfield is the appropriate person to address that.
Okay, uh-huh.
So an overwhelming majority of our students arrive at school by public transportation or by walking. To start with, until we get to senior year, students aren't eligible to drive. We estimate that if all of the expansion occurs and we're at 800 students, we'll have 5 more drivers among our students based upon the current sense of how many students do drive. We are willing to commit that there are, by the way, very few buses. We have a van coming, a 12-seater van coming in from Staten Island. We have a van coming in from the city, a van coming in from New Jersey. There are no school buses regularly at the high school facility. There are for occasional trips. We're willing to commit that the dropping on and off from buses and vans will be on the Avenue J side of the building. And we do not see, based on the number of students who may happen to drive, that there'll be any difference between what's allowed as of right and what may be granted through the variance. We are also willing to overinvest in signs, monitoring, teaching our students. As our neighbors have indicated, we have young men and women who are eager to be part of an overall community, and we'll work with them to make sure that the parking and the driveways and such, and again, we'll invest in whatever it takes to make sure that we're a good neighbor on that. But we estimate there'll be 5 more cars potentially between Avenue J and East 16th and East 17th Street if our petition is granted.
So that's because of the children who are driving right now, yeah. But what about drop-offs by parents?
So again, with the high school students, there aren't that many drop-off by parents. And again, I realize it's a qualitative and not a quantitative statement, but we're also, the primary main entrance is going to be the lobby and entrance on Avenue J, and East 17th Street has always been intended as an auxiliary entrance into the courtyard space and into the Beit Midrash, so that we expect and we can in fact contour our traffic so that pickups and drop-offs into the building take place during the regular drop-off and pick-off times at Avenue J.
And how far is this, is public transportation?
There is the Avenue J stop on the Q line is half a block away at the intersection of Avenue J and East 16th Street. It's visible and hearable from East 17th Street all the way through, and that's one of the B11 bus. The B6 bus also runs on Avenue J, so it's not quite the Barclay Center, but it's a very accessible public transportation spot.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about that? The only other thing is, in terms of, if we just talk about, again, the border between neighbors, if you could also include landscaping plans for that border area. I don't know if the architect's still here, but so to include that, yeah.
You know, the Edward Bennett Williams, when he owned the Washington Redskins and he had hired George Allen as his head football coach, said that he gave George Allen an unlimited budget and Coach Allen exceeded it. But we have made a commitment to our neighbors that within some reasonable budgetary constraints, we're all ears and ready and eager to take and accept their landscaping suggestions throughout the expansion to the property.
Great, thank you. Thank you. That's good. Okay.
In addition, I would just like to point out there are a number of other people that are here today. Unfortunately, some had to leave due to the timing. But if everybody who's here in support, please raise your hand just to show the board and save them 3 minutes per person.
Thank you.
You see, we do have a number of people.
Saving of the 3 minutes per person.
I'm sure more than you, the other applicants appreciate that.
Right. Okay, so a few things to do, right? So the architect is going to look at
That is correct.
increasing that distance or reducing the bulk, whichever one accomplishes that, less of an impact on neighbors, showing suggested landscaping that would be useful. If you could add to your statement of facts information about the traffic, so the van and parent drops and information about distance of the subway. And I
Be glad to.
Oh, and also, well, we're going to wait and to see how the architect revises the plans, but there's the issue of the setbacks, but I think that's going to change as things shift. So maybe we'll wait for the discussion on that open terrace space.
Well, that open terrace space on the.
You know, so the original
second floor,
discussion
we're going
from
to change
Commissioner
that to a
Montanez. Right, but as the architect studies this, the massing may change, so something may change, so the terraces may be in a different kind of configuration, so maybe we hold off until we see those floor plans. Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, so, I don't know how long, the architect probably needs couple weeks to do this, and it's
How many
Christmas.
weeks do you need realistically to?
As soon as, provided we get the approval from the school, probably do this within a week.
Well, it's okay, you don't have to work during Christmas, New Year.
Sorry, we just
Because our
got, we got an
hearing-
contingent on approval from the client, and we got an approval from the client, right? At the
Just
same
now.
time. Just now.
Okay, so do you want to submit before, let's say, on the 24th? Or do you want to submit after the New
What
Year?
continued hearing date would we be eligible for with the 24th?
I'd
What-
say let me see, the 13th we have.
We would love the 13th.
The 13th? Ah. They'll push the date up. Good.
Okay.
So we could handle, right, there's only one dig. We could handle the 13th of January for a hearing date. So it would mean you'd need to submit by the 30th. Think you could do that?
Do you think we can, it's not just studying it, it's studying it, determining it can be done or cannot be done, and making the changes to the plan?
Might be tight.
You can do that?
Sure.
What about the neighbors?
What? Oh, and neighbors, I don't know if the neighbors want to submit anything in writing, or they just want to, because you're going to be meeting with the school. I think they should just meet with the school, and if you could bring a representative here, it doesn't have to be all of you, all of them, but just someone here to represent your position on the 13th, that would work. Okay? Okay?
Wonderful, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Next item is item number 21, 17613BZ, 31 Bond Street, Manhattan.
Richard, that's okay. Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. I'm joined today by Matthew Baird and Teresa Ball from Matthew Baird Architects, the project architects, as well as Barbara Cohn from Robert B. Pauls to discuss the financials. Madam Chair, Commissioners, when we first were approached with regards to bringing this case to the board, we did our diligence and reviewed cases in the area of 31 Bond. And so we wanted to see what the character of that area was with regards to board precedent, as well as what had previously been granted in terms of the size of buildings and the nature of the relief. What we found was that on Bond Street, there are no fewer than 5 BSA grants within 400 feet of the premises here. And then in each of those cases, they cited the property in question with regards to size, and in some cases narrowness, and in some cases the obsolete nature of the building. So that in calendar 12407BZ, 521 Broome Street, the board found that the absence of a loading dock and lack of space to install one contributed to obsolescence. On June 2004, calendar 37703BZ, 25 Bond Street, which is next door to the premises, the boards found that the small site, which was 11,416 square feet, would, quote, result in a building with an undesirable floor plate for minor manufacturing or office requirements. The list goes on to 4640 Bond Street with a width of 27 feet and, quote, constrained and inadequate floor plates for conforming uses with a lot area of 8,000 square feet. 363 Lafayette Street, which was cited as small by the board with a lot area of 5,500 square feet. 372 Lafayette Street, which was cited as small and narrow by the board with a lot area of 3,000 square feet and a width of 26 feet 4 inches. And 41 to 43 Bond Street with a small lot area of 4,725 square feet and a width of 49 feet. Madam Chair and Commissioners, every one of these cited cases here is wider and and larger than the property. The property is by far the narrowest and smallest of all these properties which are within 400 feet and which all got grants for residential use by the board. Moreover, for 25 Bond Street, which is literally next door to the premises, the board cited the 11,000 square foot small site as being a factor in uniqueness as well as one in being unable to provide a conforming use, including conforming office use. Our site is approximately 25% of that site. I understand that we have provided the board with a lot of precedent, and I always like the opportunity to discuss that because I feel here it supports us. But the fact remains that here we've basically cited cases which are extremely close on point with regards to our small site and with regards to what we're encountering on the site with an existing building. This existing building is from 1888. We've already been through landmarks, which is basically found from a C finding, from a character finding, that what we're proposing is within the character of the surrounding area. But as Matthew and Teresa can talk to, the nature of the building itself here, the existing building and the obsolescence, while we rely on these prior cases, specifically the ones which talk about the inability to install a loading dock, the obsolescence for manufacturing commercial use, the truth is that this building, which is an old, beautiful building, has aspects to it which just make this a bad building for conforming use. It has walls which are excessively thick, which are 2 feet thick on either side, so it's an additional disadvantage to a building compared to a building which would be newly constructed, because now our interior width is only 21 feet wide. So I just kind of wanted to start the conversation by saying that we feel that we fare well with regards to existing precedent. We also cited to the board at the board's request prior cases which addressed two things. The first was an FAR of over 5, and the second was a rear yard of less than 30 feet. I also understand that the 5.4 and 5.5 cases, that there's additional hardships on those sites. But the fact remains that two of those properties, both of which were given grants of 5.4 and 5.5, were cited as small sites by the board as a factor in uniqueness, two of them, and both of those were greater than the size of our site by 33% or more. Moreover, with regards to the rear yard we looked at, the board asked us and said, take a look and see if there's any similar cases with a rear yard of less than 30 feet. We found a case, 46 Reade Street. It was rented within the last 4 years. The rear yard, basically the situation was that the building's rear wall had been demolished so that the applicant there could easily have reconstructed a building with a 30-foot rear yard. The applicant there cited the historical context. It was a historic building. The building had previously had a rear yard of 15 feet, and the board accepted that in allowing for a rear yard of less than 30 feet. Here, we're taking an existing rear yard condition, which goes down to 6 feet at its shallowest, 6 feet, and we're basically trying to improve the condition of the building, improve not only the condition for the existing, for the proposed residents of our building, but for the surrounding area by creating a rear yard which goes up from 18 feet to 30 feet. It's really what we feel to be a better building, and it's one which the architects who I know, and the team has been working really hard on this. I know that they've spent a lot of time and attention to this design and feel that this is appropriate for this site. So just to conclude my introductory statement, while it's true that on an absolute level we're asking for a 5.4, the truth of the matter is that when you look at these Bond Street cases, every one of them has floor area. If you go beyond FAR for a moment, everyone has floor area which greatly exceeds that of the premises. Going down the list on Great Jones and Bond Street, 25,000 square feet of floor area, 71,000, 37,000, 57,000, 23,000, 32,000. Our proposed condition has a floor area of 16,000 square feet. So I think that given the fact that you have a great, wonderful existing building here, and that from an architectural standpoint, it's really not seeking a very large waiver here, we would ask the board to strongly consider our proposal, and we'd be happy to discuss any of the specifics.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing is that all of the Bond Street cases that you cite have FARs of 5.
Correct.
Which is so that's the first thing.
Absolutely.
And none of them were, none of the existing buildings were modified in the way that you're talking about modifying.
Correct.
Yours is an extremely deep site. You're 116 feet deep, I think?
Correct.
And so you have an advantage over many other cases. There's many 25 by 100-foot lots in this area, many of which have received variances, most of them at 5 FAR, because that is sort of the standard variance unless there's an extreme hardship that's been articulated. And in those cases that you cited in the other areas, there were extreme hardships there. Near tunnels, incredible environmental contamination. One of them had this strange cantilever that had to be
Understood.
built. I mean, and so obviously those had to overcome much more of a burden, right? In your case, you have an extremely deep lot. You have the report from Urban Cartographics that explains that other sites that are a comparable type with existing buildings have 30-foot rear yards. That makes them more valuable than this building. And this building with its teeny rear yard isn't valuable. So obviously, according to the materials that you've submitted, a 30-foot rear yard would make this a more desirable location.
I understand that aspect of the argument from Urban Cartographics. I understand that does not hold water. What we looked to Urban Cartographics to and what we looked to that study for is basically when we call our site a small site and a narrow site, what's the reality of that? And what Urban Cartographics establishes for us is that out of in the 1,000-foot radius in the M15B properties, for the 182 properties located within that area and within that radius, 25 have a width of 25 feet or less, like our site, and of those 25, 18 have residential use. So that puts us in 7 out of 182, which, as the chair knows, is more than enough to satisfy a uniqueness finding. I think that the way that we've conceptualized it is basically that we're trying, and the architects who, it's like a child that they're caring for, and we have a lot of these conversations. The idea is that if you're looking at a conversion scenario, one that basically looks at, I've cited some cases in M1 districts where you had an existing manufacturing building in an M1 district which would have permitted a conforming manufacturing FAR of 1. There's residential conversion cases in those cases which said, okay, we understand you have an existing non-compliant bulk, but we're going to let you convert in those cases from your existing commercial building at, in one case, 3.12, in another case, 2.81, to a residential FAR. In that case, that is about 3 times what would typically be permitted, but the understanding was the BSA said, we're not going to make you destroy your building, take down your building, alter your building that dramatically. And so that's why we're trying and fighting so hard to keep the 5.4 here.
Right, I understand, except to say that you're coming in saying that you're removing the rear yard, that was the rear wall, that was something voluntary. So, and the other part is that you want to take that floor area and move it to the top. So that's a completely different set of criteria than these straight conversions where no other work is being done. And the case that you cited on Lake Street,
yes,
we really don't have enough information. My guess, because you didn't provide us with the data on that case, was that all they had done is when they were gutting it, they removed the joists, and it's typical to remove the rear wall as you're doing that, or it often falls down. So it sounds to me that all they were doing is putting the wall back where it was. They weren't proposing to cut back the building. Once you start, and so they also weren't proposing to cut back and relocate floor area. You're doing something that you haven't shown us one case similar to yours where you're cutting back and relocating floor area. So it opens up a whole different analysis.
Except that in the Bond Street cases, if you just look at on an absolute level what those buildings look like, the total heights of those buildings ranged from 84 feet to 130 feet with a median height of 120 feet. They are huge buildings. We are basically so far from that. Our building basically fits within these buildings. It is a small building. It is a very modest waiver. And as far as a C finding is concerned and a character finding, I really feel that it's a very artfully done facade on a beautiful building, which basically has been approved by landmarks as being contextual.
But we're supposed to be looking at the minimum variance necessary, right?
Which is why I think that at the end of the day, I think it's a B finding question, which is that our numbers support what we're trying to do here.
Right.
And I think that, and Barbara's happy to talk to some of the specifics behind the B
This actually
finding.
isn't even a Barbara question. This is more towards you. Don't you think that cutting back the building and recreating that floor area on the roof actually creates a greater expense and is also driving a need for that extra space?
It does
and
not.
One could even argue perhaps that it's almost self-created.
I don't think so, because I think that if you take that existing building with a 6-foot rear yard, that the units are going to basically be depressed in value, so that by allowing us to put more of that floor area up, you're basically creating a reasonable return for the property. So I don't think that it's going to come to a cost question. I don't think that it does.
Well, some of it's a cost, I mean, again, you have an extraordinarily deep lot. The bit of information that we received about the rear yard, which was not more of a coincidence that we received it, not that you submitted what we actually asked for, shows that adjoining properties have much deeper rear yards, and that your proposal will fall short of lining up with their rear yard.
I think I'd like the architects to address that, because they've looked at that particular issue very closely.
Okay. And then the other part of it is, because your building is so much deeper than a typical, the effect of what we're suggesting, the 30-foot rear yard, is effectively giving you a 10-foot rear yard of only 10 feet if you were looking at it as if this was a 100-foot deep lot. I mean, in other words, built 70. So you'd be built 90 here. which is a much deeper building, therefore much more valuable than all of those other ones that are built 70 or 80. And part of what the urban cartographics analysis showed was that would make it a much more valuable interior. So there's too much disconnect between all of the different arguments, and your citations to all of these cases don't support these arguments. And so really, if you want to keep this going indefinitely, we can keep this going indefinitely. But, at a certain point.
We understand.
We don't see that you've made a case for this. And the numbers, as we said yesterday in the review session, absolutely don't support this. I mean, in addition to which, there's significant errors on the numbers.
Can we address the numbers
Yes.
specifically now?
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Cohen, Robert B. Pauls, LLC. What I'd like to do actually is go through summarize the submissions, my submissions, and as I go through, I'll probably be able to answer a lot of the comments and issues that came up through the course of hearings and executive sessions. So what we started out with was a report that looked at a proposed building with a subcellar with a pool. It was reconfiguring the building. It created more light and air in the back. It created quality units. And all of that was supported by the pricing that was identified in comps that were asking comps. It also looked at the as-of-right office scenario and a 22-room hotel scenario. Subsequent to the report, I was asked about the site value comps, and in August, I identified the uses of the ground floors, and that led us to the hearing in September, where we went through the report and we recognized that we shouldn't assume any retail use on the as-of-right office scenario, and we talked about the building sales comps to reflect that this would not have the retail use and that they should be adjusted downward. The other thing we talked about were the office rentals, that the market had changed and that they were rising, and to get more recent office comps for that. So went back to do that as well. That then led us to a staff email in September 26th that said to use actual residential sales, not the asking prices for that. And that leads us to October 21st, which was the submission after the hearing, which did a lot of things. And this is sort of where I think a lot of Commissioner Brown's comments sort of come into play. So October 21st, there were a couple of things happening. One is there was a closer look at the subcellar pool amenity. It was taken out, too costly, left the building, the proposed building, without that pool or its amenity by that. The site values, the actual comps were carried over, because we certainly always try to keep consistency from the original report going forward, not to sort of keep changing. But one of the things in the building sales comps, which were adjusted downward, the other very important thing that we spent a lot of time on is actually reviewing a lot of the square footage, which in some cases were sort of inconsistent. And the architect took a close look at that. And I had actually realized that in the original report, the above-grade square footage of the building that was used for the site value was actually the zoning floor area of 16,417, and that correctly, it should have been the gross, which is 16,447.
But can I interrupt you, because that wasn't the issue that I had with your site value, with your building sales.
Well, as you were discussing in your comments, you were saying, well, I went back and I took off 10% and I
But you
did the
did it,
math.
that's the whole point, is that the conversation was about the adjustments downward for the fact that retail should not be considered as a
Right,
right
which is
of this
done.
site. So go back to the original report.
Right, which
The
all
very
had
first
one. It all had one, and then
Right.
in October.
But no, but they all didn't have one. So if you look at every single adjustment, and we could kind of go down the list if you want me to call off every adjustment, but all of them had an adjustment for C of O of zoning of 1, except for Greenwich Street, which had .80. Now, out of all the 5 comparables, Sale 1, Sale 3, and Sale 4 had legal C of Os for stores. Those 3 sales should be adjusted downward to reflect the fact that this site doesn't have a legal C of O for a store. So those 3 C of O zoning adjustments should go down by 10%, which means the first one should go from 1 to .9, the
Okay,
third one
which it-
should go from .8 to .7, and the fourth one should go from 1 to .9. Now, in addition, if you look at Sale 2, your Sale 2, which occurred on Canal Street, had a locational adjustment of .90, which I accept, because I don't think that Canal Street and this site on Bond Street are necessarily comparable. Now, when you go to the next report, where after I asked you to make those corrections, you made the correction to Sale 1 for the C of O, bringing it down to .9. In Sale 2, you adjusted the location up to a 1 from a .9, and you don't give any reason why. In Sale 3, you take the C of O zoning location from a .8, which should go down to a .7. You bring it back up to a .9 with no explanation, and then you do take down Sale 4. So,
And 5.
right, but you're not giving me any reason why you did what you did to the other adjustments, one of which went in the wrong direction, one which was adjusted for the first time with no reason. And so if you make the adjustments, going back to the original report, and adjust out the 10% for the C of O issue, you would come down to a price per square foot, even given the fact that you've adjusted your square footage upwards. You have a price per square foot that's much lower than it originally was, which would result in a big savings in the site value.
I mean, I'll go back and look at
That was
change there,
the
but
comment that I had originally. I
Okay,
had no comment about the square footage, but it's okay if you corrected your square footage up. That's fine.
Right. I mean, I'll look at why I adjusted the location issue, and I don't think the 8 would have gone down to 7.
Well,
But
it should go down to 7. If you're taking a 10% off the top for the fact that you don't have legal retail in the other ones, then your 8 should go down to a 7. You're taking 10% off of Sale 1 from 1 to .9. You're taking 10% off of Sale 4 from 1 to .9. Well, then you should take 10% off of Sale 3, so .8 to .7.
I'm gonna go back and look at that.
That's where I'm coming from in
No, I
terms of
understand, but
adjusting
I'm
the
gonna-
price per square foot down. Then the price drops precipitously.
Right, well, I would like to review that again and respond to why changes were made there. But the square footage issue does come into play, in a significant way as
Well,
well.
it's actually fairly minimal. You're talking about, 30 square feet? You went from 16,417 square feet to 16,447 square feet. So that's pretty minimal.
Right, well, I'd like to review that and respond to that. So just to continue through, the office lease were adjusted and were put into place there as well. The other thing that was done here is that because that amenity disappeared, the sales prices also got adjusted to reflect that. The last thing that got changed was updating the underpinning and some of those other costs that went into each scenario. And then lastly was looking at the 5.0 scenario and indicating how that, the impact of that came into play in terms of the quality of the units and the loss of a bedroom and so on, and how sales had to get adjusted there as well. The other thing I just also want to note in terms of costs that I have deliberately left out, really due to some comments from prior cases, in terms of the additional costs to provide the quality finishes that this type of unit requires. Typically, we add $10 or $15 more a square foot because the costs here are really just the interior fit out plus those extra costs regarding underpinning and the back wall and so on.
When you give us a report, when you come here with your first set of financials, I would assume that you're taking great care into the different assumptions that you're putting into your report, right? And so when I make suggestions for corrections or I find things that may be errors in one portion of the report, I'm still thinking that the rest of the report is of high quality. So the fact that we could get 4 reports in and then all of a sudden you're going to discuss an adjustment that you want to make to the other side of the equation, which is cost, almost in anticipation of the fact that you're going to have to lower the site value and possibly even raise your residential sales prices, I kind of find that calls into question.
I'm not saying I'm going to do.
No.
I'm not saying that that's what I'm anticipating doing, or I left it out to hold it in the back and all of that. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, I'm just noting it here, and the reason why I've left it out due to prior discussions where you have told me we've never done that before, you shouldn't be adding, and so on. So all I'm saying is that it's not here, and I did it deliberately, but and that the costs, which also speaks, I think, a comment regarding whether it included the extra disrepair and so on. It does not. It only reflects the build-out for the use. So I just note it, that's all. I'm not using it, to sort of as a weapon.
Well,
or
the other comment I made had to do with the residential sales prices.
Okay.
And the discussion about the amenities.
Right, so October sort of set the tone for the new proposed and all the impacts of the new proposed as well as the 5.0. The comments that came before the last hearing where we postponed, which then generated the submission for November 24th, dealt with the site value, but then really spoke to the request for more details about the residential sales comparables and how they are viewed and then applied in terms of the financials. As I said, I was confined to actual sales. The other very important factor in selecting comparables is location. The The next thing sort of is looking at in terms of size, and recognizing that certainly here in Soho, NoHo, and where there are these existing loft buildings, each having their own peculiarities in terms of bedrooms that are created or how the space is configured for residential use. Just looking at, say, only bedrooms and trying to find, truthfully, an exact comparable to our proposed is virtually impossible. So again, I identified the closest ones and made adjustments according to the amenities, which was also a very big discussion about how does this building, this existing building, compare to other buildings in the area. It is really at a competitive disadvantage because it doesn't have the amenities others have, and that would certainly justify prices to get adjusted downward. I actually, just last night, did a search for elevated condominium sales in zip codes 10012 and 13, at a 67 sales of what are 1,000 square feet units or more in those zip codes. I then selected what was in the neighboring area, putting all of Tribeca and all those significant buildings with views, et cetera, out of the equation. So out of 21 of these, if you averaged all 21, including the very special ones at the top, as well as those at the bottom, average price per square foot was about $2,260. Now, of those 21, if you got rid of the high end for them, 17 of them that are $2,850 a square foot or less, their average is about $1,886 a square foot. So that the 1990, that is the average adjusted, that is then used as an average, and in the stacking plan, that it's applied to the mid floor of the building, with the lower floors getting a little less, and as you move up, higher floors getting more, is pretty much in line with what is actually an unadjusted 1,886 square feet. Those on the very high end have amazing amenities. 40 Mercer has the unit there that comes out to $4,100 a square foot, has a pool on an outdoor terrace. Those certainly are not comparable.
Sorry,
Wait a
just
minute.
stop there?
Right, because you have a full roof garden here, and you have enough space in your lobby for a doorman/concierge. So you really have amenities in this building.
Well,
And you have, as the chair said yesterday, these are beautiful, multi-level apartments. So this really puts this in the upper sector of apartment quality, clearly. And so I really think that you're adjusting too much downward.
And your
not
comps, if you just look at the floor plans of your comps, I mean, compared to this one, to these, you have in this proposal, you have a 3-story townhouse with a ground floor backyard, which, a 30-foot backyard, let's just say. Or let's just say it's not a 30-foot backyard. It's only a measly, whatever it's going to be, 20 feet or something like that. Still, it's a backyard in a townhouse. And then you have a duplex and you have a triplex with penthouse roof and 2 terraces, a setback terrace and the rooftop. How is that comparable to a simplex that's kind of a strange configuration? One of them that you have is, I don't even understand how it's comparable. It's a series of strange little bedrooms that sort of creep along
I'm not sure which
in the
one
strange,
you're-
on Crosby
you're
Street,
referring-
56 Crosby. I mean, if I think about the residential market now
Yeah.
and how much focus there is on trying to develop these extraordinary units, there are examples of sold, because they fly off the shelves, there are examples of sold extraordinary units all over this neighborhood, and it seems like you went out of your way of finding the ones that are crappy, frankly.
No, I would, no, first of all, I would have looked for, say, more, say, if there were more duplexes or triplexes and things like that, if I was able to go for, to pick units that were in the asking category. I had to deal with existing sales. The 40 bond is a multi-level example. The difference there is that, yeah, there's a garden there. There's 40 Bond is a Ian Traeger property, and the residents. Oh, okay. Just going to say all the amenities that are offered there, so that looking at that each of the buildings and the units, it's not about just looking at units and their number of bedrooms. It's about the unit. It is about bedrooms. It is about size. It is about the entire building itself and what it offers. Yes, there are duplexes, multi-levels in the proposed, but it's a very narrow building. There's you got to move up and down. That that gets offset with other factors. So, but I'm happy to. One, I want to certainly go back to the site value issue and respond to that, and I can continue to sort of clarify the comparable and how prices I think are reasonable.
Or you could just give us a larger rear yard
Right.
and just go on
Well, then
your
you
way.
have less to sell and units that are less attractive. So, it's not like you can just lower the prices to
Actually,
everything and you get
The
someone
units
to buy
won't be
it.
less attractive because they'll have much more light and air. They're going to be dark, these units,
And
right?
one less
Looking-
bedroom, and
Well,
they're
that's
smaller
a-
and
that's a
less
question.
private
That's
space, so.
questionable.
Yeah,
So,
that's so far not credible either, so that's to speak to
We
the
actually have to look,
architect.
I mean, I
But
think
you
that's
have
where I think the
huge
architect can
closets.
explain a little more.
These huge closets, which are
Oh,
bedrooms
but
in and
I
of
also
themselves.
would just like to speak about the as-of-right solution that you have for the hotel. This last submission was the first one that showed what kind of a floor plan you're relying on, and it maintains the existing elevator in the front, which
Right.
is really not a credible renovation of a building to turn it into a hotel.
And the other thing is that it actually showed 15 rooms when the analysis was actually for a 22-room hotel. I got to sort of look back to see where that plan is and whether it had any movement of elevators, because I don't think so, because we didn't add any additional cost for that. So we'll have to sort of
to
try to find
revise
that plan
because-
to, but, it was a 22-room that was analyzed, not 15.
Well,
So,
whatever it would be, I don't know how many even floors it is at this point with the as-of-right. So whatever the correct count would be, locating the elevator into the center, which is where it's
Right,
more
well,
likely,
we'll-
right? Okay.
revisit the plan, but I don't expect it to
Okay,
change
and then,
anything.
if we just were to look at sort of the gut reaction factor,
Well,
the
I don't
sniff
know.
test, the smile test, all that stuff, the argument here is about 1,500 square feet, right? And for 1,500 square feet, the numbers in the analyses, between the 5 FAR and the 5 point, whatever, 4 FAR, is arguing that with the 5 FAR, you'd make a 2.2% return, but with 1,500 square feet more, you'd make a 10.5% return, and like the entire project is hinging on the 1,500 square feet. I mean, that's an awfully close.
Well, that's why in many ways, and that's why I think the architect can speak much more exactly to this, is that it's not about just 1,500 square feet. It's about what happens when you take off more, you have less to sell. It's not only less to sell just size-wise overall, but it's about the quality of those units, how it matches the marketplace in a building that is at a disadvantage to many other buildings that a potential client has to choose from.
Wouldn't the marketplace be, if we had a 30-foot rear yard, wouldn't the marketplace be other buildings that have been converted to residential in this area? Many of them with variances. I mean, there are a lot of buildings in this neighborhood that have converted. They're 25 by 100 lots. They're built 70 deep. This is going to be built 90 deep if it had a 30-foot rear yard. So they're at a 20-foot depth advantage over those. Somehow, those manage to support themselves.
But you have to still go back to one, either recent sales or asking prices, and really delve deeper into what it is that is being offered, not just the unit, the whole package. It's that specific, and it matters. Everything matters for this level of residential use. And that's sort of one of the reasons why I kind of added some of the articles. It's really about how every little thing.
Okay,
matters.
and just finally, I
Yep.
noted on the analysis that for some reason the cellar is not factored in at all.
Sure it is. The unit sizes, the unit square foot in the stacking
It says
plans
above
include.
grade.
No, in the stacking plan, which is the unit square footages, you'll see it's first and cellar, which is both, those square footages, second, third, fourth, and up.
But
And that's what's used to generate the sales income, is the unit square footages times the.
Okay, so the
price,
cellar is
so-
in fact included in it, even
Oh,
though
sure,
on the top
sure,
it
'cause it's a
says
unit.
above grade.
I'm
Area.
not sure when you say on top, that's
At the top
when
of the
when I
chart.
do those above grade and zoning floor area and everything, that's for the whole building. That's not, there's gross area, there's zoning area, there's unit size, which is the saleable area, leasable area, so, and that's one of the things we actually sort of cleared up was zoning
above
versus
grade
gross
building
versus, so, but the,
Shows
certainly the
We
cellar.
can also point it out in the next submission.
Okay.
Matthew Baird was hoping to just discuss some of the
Okay.
architectural aspects of the building.
And Teresa Wall, we're going to present together Commissioner
Just state your
Perlmutter.
name for the record.
Yes, my name is Matthew Baird,
Teresa Ball.
and Commissioners, thank you for all your patience and all the detail that you've gotten into with this very small and, relatively speaking, probably insignificant project, considering some of the things you're reviewing here. But I do want to say that, I've been at this for a long time. I live right up the street here. I've been living in this neighborhood for 20 years as an architect, and I've worked on numerous conversions from commercial to residential. When we moved here 20 years ago, many of these buildings were abandoned, and it was lucky when people were renovating them. And there was a spirit here at planning that it was a great thing that we were taking on these fantastic buildings and bringing them back to life. And that's what we're trying to do here. And the implication that 1,500 square feet isn't a big deal in this real estate market when it represents 10% of the square footage that my client purchased on the site is, frankly, that's 10% of the building. Now, I know it's a small building, and 1,500 doesn't seem much when you're reviewing projects of 70,000 feet, but if you take your pro forma on any development project and you say, sorry, make it 10% smaller, it goes right to the bottom line. So I know that we're into the detail here, and perhaps we've painted ourselves into a corner with all the back and forth and everything that we've been discussing. I just wanted to sort of revisit. We've been here 3 times now, and the project has been before you for over a year. First with a different owner, for us with a year. And when we think about this project, we think about an existing non-conforming use of 16,400 square feet. It's existing non-conforming. And when we come at these projects as architects, our effort is to not make it any less conforming and not add any square footage. And we thought we were going about this in the right manner. We went to Landmarks and worked with staff there to figure out what was appropriate. We had over 5 meetings with staff before we even made a presentation or filed anything public. We worked really hard to try to make a building that was in the character of the neighborhood. And I think the task before us is to try to show you that what we've designed is actually sensible, and that by keeping the 16,400 square feet on this site is what we had thought was a foregone conclusion. We're not trying to add square footage. We're just trying to maintain what was on the site. The discussion of FAR, I understand, but really the discussion is about change of use. And the leverage here is that if you want a change of use, you have to comply with an FAR that we would impose on new construction. But that's never been, in my experience of working on these buildings, an implication. I mean, here we are wrestling with a historic building that, as Richard mentioned, had 24-inch thick walls. I mean, the floor plate alone, you already lose a ton of square footage on the net to gross. It's not like new construction. And we're not here saying, hey, we have an existing building of 16,400 and we want it to be 18,000. There's lots of applicants that come in with that kind of a request, upsizing FAR, and there's lots of denials when those kinds of requests are made. So I want to talk a little bit about the design issues that have been brought up, and we watched YouTube and we really focused on your concerns, and we're just going to address the specifics. And maybe, Teresa, you want to talk about the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've already touched on landmarks, and we know that we've been
Could you
approved by
speak up,
landmarks.
please? Closer to the
Sure,
mic.
of
Or maybe
course.
hold the mic if it's easier for you.
You got it. I think this is probably a good time to review together the rear yard and as it relates specifically to the neighboring buildings. So if you turn to page, we could do it on a couple. Let's do page 23 for the site plan of the 5.0 building. You'll see that our neighbor to the east, which is 33 Bond, has actually 2 buildings on their property. Did you find that page okay?
I'm not sure if I'm looking at this.
Okay, I
page
can
yet.
walk
We
you
don't know
through it.
where they
Yeah,
were
where-
looking at proposed plans. Where are we?
Actually,
What are we?
I can
what
show you on the
set are we
board.
looking at?
yeah.
But what set are we
Yeah.
looking at?
The
Proposed plan?
proposed plans, the 5
Page
which,
23 is a section.
sorry.
Well, I can talk about it here.
Page 49, maybe? Is that the last page?
What
with
are we-
the,
Yeah, if you just
It's
draw it, Matthew,
49?
I'll walk them through it and
You
then
have
I'll
a hard
find the
copy in your
page.
hand?
I do.
Maybe that'll
Get
get
us
It's
somewhere.
very hard to
Yeah.
see
Maybe I'll
if
start on
it's
the board,
page
just to
49.
Yes, okay. You got 49.
You need to take the mic with you, sorry.
Sorry. Gotta be
Here, I
expedient here.
have it, but I-
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I just drew this quick site plan.
Here. so you-
And I think it speaks to the unique qualities of this little building. What we were trying to do, we have this very small rear yard, and it's quite dismal space back there, both for our building and for the neighboring building. And so, however, because it's non-conforming, there isn't a requirement necessarily to remove the back wall, but we thought it would improve the rear yard to remove a portion of the back wall. Now, that was a big deal at Landmarks. They didn't really like the idea that we were taking that off, and we had to present an argument. Obviously, what's unique about this site is its relationship to Shinbone Alley and these very interesting inner block views that are rare in this area. You have this fantastic alley, and what we wanted to do was to bring the project back just so much so that from 2 bedrooms on the back, you'd be able to look down into this open space. Now, if we're required, the only way we can make this a 5.0 is to take the setback back to about here, right? And that kills all the crosstown views. So not only are we being asked to reduce the square footage that was existing in the building, but we're actually making a less desirable result. We spoke about this design at length with the neighbors in this building. They endorsed it at Landmarks. We really think this is of interest, and that's why we're here to ask that you consider the setback that we've proposed, which is a little bit more than 30 feet on this side and a little bit less on this side, as currently drawn in the submission you've seen. Yeah.
And just to clarify the neighbor condition, so this is 33 Bond, and it actually has, it's the tallest part is in the front on Bond Street. And then there's a 1-story level that goes all the way to the back, and our current proposal is cutting back actually right at that line where that ends. And then there's actually an additional story that's on top of that, which also ends at that rear yard.
2-story that's up against the property line?
Yeah, here, I'll draw this.
But it's only 2 stories, so,
Yeah.
okay, so.
Yeah.
But what about the property to the east of that?
And so that's 25 Bond, that's the big one. And their first floor is back at where we're cutting now. And then they have a setback above the first floor that's 30 feet. They have a parking garage.
So that's kind of the point,
Yeah.
right? So
Can
your
I just say
adjoining
that-
properties are pulled back, and you're not pulling back anywhere close to them. And, you know,
The adjoining property, sorry, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify what you said. The parking garage has a setback. Above the parking garage, there's a garden. So the footprint of this building, this is an outdoor space. And this is not exactly to scale, and we can send a site plan to justify this. But what we have here is on the east side, a setback that is deeper than 30 feet. And so we were trying to find a zone in the middle. So we came back 30 feet here. The existing building is another, I think it's about 40 for the residential portion. And then, as Teresa explained, there's a 2-story, what used to be probably a stable building to the east.
Well, shouldn't you then, above the first floor, have views of that alley, even if you cut back, simply because the building adjacent is set back so much further?
Our setback on this side is at 30 feet?
No,
It's-
if you set back a little more, like you were
Here.
saying, basically, if you go to the horizontal line, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, if you set back there, you said you would no longer have the view of the alley, that open view, but technically, shouldn't you have it above that garage floor because
I
they're
would have
really
it.
set back?
If I have it, I only have it from 1 bedroom. That's the problem. So I had designed a 4-bedroom layout on this floor, which allowed 2 bedrooms with ensuite baths, which sounds extravagant, but that is what we're building for in this market now. These 2 bedrooms each had a view to the west. And if we go to the 30-foot setback, we can't do 2 bedrooms on the back.
Why can't you do 2 bedrooms on the back?
Because if you look at the, well, I can draw why we can't. You can do 2 bedrooms, you can't do 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. So probably if we pull to a full 30-foot setback all the way across the site, we drop 1 bedroom on that floor. We certainly drop 1 bathroom. because we have to lose, we effectively lose this portion of the project. That's the notch that goes away.
And what if you drew 30 feet just straight back as opposed to paralleling your trapezoidal site?
That's what I would propose. I mean, that I wouldn't want to do the trapezoid. Yeah, hold 30 feet average.
Right. Because, the other part of it, which is very confusing, and especially when you're fighting over floor area like this, you have this sunrooms at the front.
And those
so
are-
effectively, you're pulling the whole structure back, and you have those cutouts, which add bulk, but aren't floor area.
They are included in the FAR. Yeah, the sunrooms are included.
But the cutouts are
No,
not.
the cutouts.
The cutouts meaning, what
You have
cutouts?
cutouts. You have double height spaces in the
Yes,
living room.
yes. But this is good design. Double height spaces, trying to bring the light down, and the building is no taller than it was originally. We've actually pushed the bulk to the rear yard at the request of LPC. And if we look at the cross-section, I think the best one to look at is maybe,
Well, but you're taking cutouts so that you have, you're taking cutouts so that you have floor area so you can put it on the top. That's what we do, right? Right? I mean, that's a fact. It's more valuable on the top because you have views, so you take out floor area from there and you move it to the
okay,
top.
yeah.
That's why we do it.
Yes,
right?
sure.
And the sunrooms, which are not bedrooms, they're up in front of the bedrooms. You could easily shift the entire plan forward and eliminate the sunrooms. It's not standard to any of these apartments that command these huge prices per square foot.
And the problem is you have a 3-bay fenestration existing. So if you're trying to do 2 bedrooms on the front and you pull it all the way forward, you wind up with that rather unfortunate sheetrock partition dividing a window. Or you have to make some odd bedroom with a single window and a wall that jogs around the middle window. So the sunroom is actually, what we're trying to do is pull back and make a green space that can be planted and allow that dividing wall to be equal because we only have, your
Okay,
interior,
but
you
your
wind up with a
sunroom
10-foot
Doesn't
room.
need to be whatever that is. It's like 10 feet
It's
deep.
5 feet, 5 feet deep.
It does. It
Yeah.
looks more than, but.
But we thought that was a good way to make 2 equal rooms for kids and keep them 10 feet wide. But there was another thing that came up. I think we've discussed the 3 to 4 bedrooms. We just discussed the green room.
Because
There-
you
there-
have
there
on the
was-
6th floor, you have 2 bedrooms at the rear. I think that's the 6th floor. Right?
Sixth floor.
I think that's,
You have 2 bedrooms.
that's in the 5.0 scheme.
So.
No, this is the proposed plans.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Which
Not
plan
the
are you looking
5.0.
at?
It's your proposed plans where on your 6th floor, which is one of your setback floors.
Page 31.
It's our page 11, but in submission.
Okay, I'm looking at the October 21st plan.
Yeah, go to your latest submission, which is 1124, I think.
I can look at, I know what you're saying. On the
I have it page 31 also.
Yes. Okay, on the 6th floor,
You have page
um,
31. Page
that's
31
right, you're right, we
is
have
the
2
title block.
bedrooms.
I'm sorry.
So that's an example of having 2 bedrooms at the rear.
Right.
Why can't you have 2 bedrooms? I mean, we don't get it.
That's with the, once we cut out that floor area, then you have to scoot everything in. That's where it gets tricky.
And we also
I'm sure You're up to
benefit,
this task. How about
Yes.
this? You
Yes.
look, I know you're up to this task.
thank you.
Look at a project where you've got a 30-foot rear yard that doesn't parallel the angle. Okay? It just picks up 30 foot at its widest point and then comes down to whatever that ends up. Okay? I know you're up to this task.
We can do it, we can definitely do it, there's no question. But the
Let's try
challenge
to
we
get
would.
this done.
We want to get this done, it's killing us, and.
Okay, killing us too.
Okay, so we'll get out of your hair here. But I would ask that you might consider stepping the back facade so that you have western light coming into both bedrooms. So instead of, and that's really what we're asking for. But to be super clear, Commissioners, we're asking to keep the square footage that's on the site and to approve a change of
Right,
use.
that much we understand, but we have issues about financials
I
here.
understand.
And I understand the architectural intent and so on, but the fact is, the finances probably don't support a 5.4 FAR building. And, you know, in other words, it's too much of a variance. And so we're probably looking at something less than that. And you're helping us with the architecture. We'll get you out of here so you can start to build this project, please. And
Okay.
let's work on getting this done as opposed to a constant pushback because, you know, your life is short.
Yes, I got kids that need to go to college. Now tell me, when can we come back?
Let me ask you just to ask the architect a
Yes.
question. So the bridge on the first floor in the back, that
Yes.
exits out into Shinbone Alley, is that what that's for?
That's
Because
correct.
Shinbone Alley is higher than the cellar level of your terrace in the cellar level.
That's correct.
So are you building, you've got sort of like a garden wall, is that what I'm looking at? And then you've got your stretching, sort of a fire escape in a sense, across?
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Okay. I
That's
just wanted
for
to-
egress.
Okay, just wanted to, yeah, and you need it for second
We need
units?
it, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you. Thank you. Are there speakers on this item? No speakers. Okay. Any other questions from this? No. Okay.
Hi, thanks. The architects have said that they'd like 3 weeks for plans.
3 weeks? A little fast designing. Okay. So that would be putting us, so the first hearing we can really accommodate is actually the 13th of January. So if they wanted to submit on the 30th, I don't know if that works.
That works.
Submission on the 30th?
Right, Teresa?
That really works?
Yes.
As long as the architectural plans can be schematics. And we can show you what the units would look like and what the setbacks would look like.
No, actually what you're doing is not showing us, you're going to accomplish this project, so you need more time. So you're going to show us a viable project that ultimately will be supported by the financials, that increases the rear yard, and then let's see what happens with where you put the bulk upstairs, okay? To make the units work, because you have this incredibly lucky site that's 120 feet deep. It's more than 120 feet deep. You could have been given a site that's only 100 feet deep, and then what would you do? I'm sure you'd come up with something, your client would be thrilled, they'll make a killing in the market, all that stuff. So just rise to the occasion.
Thank you, we'll take the challenge.
Okay.
Let's go one more week for that.
So
Okay.
January 7th.
So how about a submission on the 6th?
Okay,
For hearing on the 27th, because we don't have one on the 20th.
okay. Okay, that's great.
Okay,
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your time.
Sure.
Item number 22, 18513BZ, 97 Franklin Avenue.
That's you.
That's me. Mr. Palatnik.
Short and sweet, let's go.
We're up.
I'm quick, I'm very quick. Eric Palatnik on behalf of the applicant. We submitted the Phase 2 report. We're waiting on DEP now, which we believe they're going to be responding to us with the requirement of a RAP and a HASP. Mr. Levy's been up to date on everything as we've been going through it, so we're just waiting on that now.
And I think I at least had a question yesterday concerning, in your cover letter, you state that the soil conditions do not represent any sort of an issue with building this building, yet the soil conditions are such that you've got some, what are they? They're organic compounds that are found at the top of the soil that you need to remediate in a special way because they're bad compounds.
Right, and that's going to be part of the RAP and the HASP.
Right, but I mean, you might want to adjust your letter, because your letter states that you don't have a problem.
Oh, well, what we were trying to convey is it'll still allow for development to occur, but it would be subject to the RAP and the HASP. I'll correct that.
Yeah, please do, because it was very confusing.
Right, I'd be happy to fix
Commissioner
it.
Montanez, did you have?
Well, just that the recommendations were for a sub-slab depressurization system and a vapor barrier. So your conclusion that it's not going to affect the project didn't really make sense.
Yeah, well, we were trying, like I said, we were trying to communicate that it could still allow the project to continue. We'll clarify the letter.
All right.
It probably wasn't worded as well as it could have been.
So you need time for DEP to...
Yeah, we're waiting on DEP, so if you could allow us until, to report back to you, hopefully we'll be done with everything in another 3 or 4 weeks, I'd imagine.
Okay. Are there anyone here to speak on this particular matter? Seeing no hands raised. So how much time did you need?
In the 3rd week in January, we could submit, give time for DEP to respond.
So you want to submit on the 20th, and we can hear you on the 3rd?
If we can even go back a little further than that, maybe, just because I don't
And
anticipate.
submit on the 27th?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And we can hear you on the 10th?
Thank you.
We can close.
We can close now?
Can we? I think so.
Yeah.
And we just have
Do
to,
you want to see the
before decision, we have
recommendations from
DEP
DEP?
approval.
You don't mind?
No, I don't mind.
No, that's fine. Okay, so
All
we
right,
can close.
so then we can close and we can decide it on the 10th.
On the 10th? Yeah.
The 10th, right?
On February 10th for a hearing.
So motion to close.
Motion to close, Chair Promoter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye.
So that's decision on February 10th?
Yes, decision.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, for January 27th. Item number 23, 18613BZ, 117 Gelson Avenue, Brooklyn, finally.
Good afternoon. Frank Salito for Harold Weinberg. At the executive session, there were a few issues yesterday. I'll make this brief. The basement, we will include the floor area. It does increase it that much more. We'll allow 1.65. It's not an issue. The zoning analysis sheet will be corrected as well as the statement. It will all reflect that. The front yard, you'd like to see some proof that it was existing. We'll see if we can get a hand on a Sanborn or maybe a Belcher and Hyde, because this building does fall into that category. Belcher and Hyde's 1927, 1929. I believe we can find something with that. The stair or porch, balcony, whatever we want to call it in the rear yard, there is a permit issued on it. Notified the owner this morning to proceed with getting it signed off. Okay?
And then you were going to add to the statement of facts about the pre-existing non-compliant front yard. So when you get those materials, just add that to the statement of facts. Okay.
And also correct the plans so that your balcony protrudes less than half of your front
That I'll
yard.
double check, because I know you had mentioned
You added 7
foot
feet, 11
but 6 feet
inches.
is the governing front yard, not 5 feet. You have to go with the lesser of the adjoining yards.
Right, no, I'm just saying, you said that your balcony can protrude to less than half. And you have it at 4 feet for the 7 feet, 11 inches. And 4 feet is more than half. That's all, so it's just like make it
About a half a
310.
foot.
If I have
That's
to
all.
go back a little bit, I will.
Okay.
But still, it should be correct.
I can submit
Right.
this on Friday.
Thank you.
You can figure it out.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So are there any speakers on this item? Okay, so you can make those submissions. I don't think we can close it, but we
Have it
still.
to you by Thursday, Friday.
Close?
Wow.
This is simple enough.
I don't know if we can close on this, though.
Yeah,
No,
let's see
I
if
don't
we
think so.
can.
There's
All
still
right.
open issues. Okay, so you could have it by Thursday or Friday. Unfortunately, oops, that's the wrong year. Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough time for it to be, the 16th is a very busy day, so this puts it into January, unfortunately. But I think if we get all that material, we can handle it on the 13th, then in January? Is that good? So a submission on the 30th for hearing on the 13th. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Item number 24, 26413BZ, 257 West 17th Street, Manhattan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Frank Angelino on behalf of Brick. Jared Perlmutter had to leave, he was here earlier, had to leave to go back to Brick because they had all of the trades on the finishing off of the ceiling, so that was an important meeting. But the ceiling basically has been completed. They're doing finishing work on it. It's advanced quite a bit since the photograph that you saw just a few days ago. They are going to immediately begin testing as soon as they can with the ceiling in place. And then they've contacted Fabrique, the company which deals with vibrations, and they invited them down to the site. They're hoping to get them at the site in order to see whether they have a better product. But in the meantime, they have Wilson Ehrig and David Koch of Criterion Acoustic, who will be doing the testing to see how the next step will be with the flooring. So that's basically a snapshot of where we are right now.
Right. So I just want to say I appreciate how cooperative you've been, the applicant has been in getting this resolved, and I know it's a long process and it's expensive, but it's great that you're doing that.
Well, they want to solve the problem.
Yes, and me too. Yeah.
You're going to have access to the residential spaces to test?
The attorneys have, the residential condos attorney is here, he can speak to it, but they have, their attorney and Brick's attorney have been speaking and have worked out scheduling that, in order to make testing available upstairs.
Good. That's great.
Okay, great. Are there speakers on this? You don't have to
State your
speak.
name for the
You
record.
don't have to speak, but.
Jay Ginsburg of Levin and Glasser for the 257 condominium. We have nothing to add today. We're pleased to hear the report and hope that things will move forward in some kind of expedited manner.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this is something where it's an ongoing process, and it's great because each week you were submitting photographs of where we are. So if you could submit photographs of the completed ceiling, and then whatever kinds of sort of testing discoveries you're making as you get them. And what we could do is just set up another one of these sort of keep in touch hearings for January. Okay, so maybe, I don't know how, maybe on January 13th you come in and give us a report and just submit each week with an update as you've been doing, okay? By the Friday of each week.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Item number 25, 32713BZ, 1504 Coney Island Avenue, Brooklyn.
Hi, Howard.
Good afternoon. Bit of a long day.
Now we're punchy, so we're
Okay.
jokes while you do this.
Just don't punch me around. So Howard Goldman for the applicant. We were either at executive session or we watched it. The issues concern the traffic study. We're prepared to address those issues. What I would like to accomplish today is to be really clear as to what information the board wants us to provide, and then go back and provide exactly what the board needs. Just a super quick overview. The project is, this is an application for a special permit to reduce parking requirement for ambulatory medical facility, which is within a mixed-use building proposed. The building's about 160,000 square feet of floor area, but it's on a big site, and the FAR is 4.8. The zoning resolution requires 346 parking spaces. The proposal is to provide 272 parking spaces. That's a reduction of 74 spaces, which is just about a 20% reduction from what is required. The benefit, the purpose of this application would allow an ambulatory medical facility to be provided at this size within the project, as opposed to a different use, which would have a lower parking requirement. For example, not-for-profit institution without sleeping accommodations could be provided. It has a lower parking requirement, and a reduction would not be needed. So what's fueling this is the desire to have the ambulatory medical space in this building. A quick word on parking policy. The 1961 zoning resolution required a lot of parking. It was the product of the 1950s, and car culture was very important at that time. More recently, the city's policy has shifted. It has not encouraged automobile usage. It's been to encourage mass transit uses. And examples of that really started, at least as far as I know, in the early 1980s, late 1970s with the Midtown zoning. The Hudson Yards has no required parking. Long Island City Special District has no required parking. And I understand there are discussions now at City Hall about reducing the parking requirement for affordable housing to reduce the costs of that housing. So the trend is clearly not to encourage a lot of cars or a lot of parking, and I think that this application is consistent with that overall trend. I do remember a discussion in 1980, a debate between the parking garage operators and the planners at city planning, where the parking garage people said, the more parking you provide, the less traffic there will be because it will get the cars off the street and into the garage, and there'll be less traffic congestion. And then the prevailing view at the city was that no, the more parking you provide, the more people are going to drive because the parking is available. And that debate went on for a long time, and ultimately I think the latter point of view prevailed, which is that if you don't provide lots of parking, you will actually reduce the amount of people who drive. And that's what's reflected in all these policy matters that I just mentioned. Okay, so enough for the policy overview. What I'd like to do now is call Jim Heineman up. He's our traffic consultant. Jim, FYI, was at City Planning for 12 years. He was the deputy director of the Environmental Review Division. So he's familiar with traffic, parking, and those kinds of things. And I asked Jim to quickly go through the various issues that were raised, give you a very brief response, and then we will, of course, submit in writing a more detailed response. Okay, so Jim.
James Heineman, Equity Environmental Engineering. As Howard noted, the uses and the bulk that we are proposing to develop are allowed as a matter of right. We're here to reduce parking. Reducing parking does not generate traffic in itself. I mean, you may be familiar with the various studies, the high cost of free parking. Ample free parking incentivizes people to drive. To the extent that you reduce it, you may encourage people to shift modes where other modes are available. Our site is a transit-rich area. It's in a walkable, medium-density community. So people do have options. That said, of course, we do want to be responsive to your concerns. So I did watch you all on YouTube. You looked great. I wanted to, I understand there was a question about what the appropriate comparable is for the traffic associated with the project. I believe the way it's stated was the same uses, the same bulk, but without the reduced parking, which to my mind would have no effect. There are other ways we looked at. What we did look at was we compared the traffic to the as-of-right proposal that has been submitted to the building department, which, as Mr. Goldman mentioned, includes more nonprofit institutional space without the ambulatory medical facility spaces, and has minimal requirement. Chair Palmer, you did catch an error in one of my spreadsheets, which I thank you for, about the vehicular mode rate for destination retail. In that case, it really had no effect because the amount of destination retail is the same under both the as-of-right and the no action. But I did correct that error. I was happy that you pointed it out to me. But another way to look at it, maybe you can help guide this, is As Howard noted, we are proposing about a 21-point-something% reduction in the amount of parking spaces from 346 to 272. So theoretically, we could look at a building that is 21% smaller and would therefore have 21% less traffic generation. I'm not sure that's exactly that all the units, all the components would get shrunk the same because they each generate required zoning parking at a different ratio. But we can, in fact, I did just out of curiosity, look at what would a building that's 78% of the size look like with the same mix of uses. Is that what you were intending?
So this isn't a seeker analysis that we're interested in. I mean, you know, you have the disadvantage of having your client having selected this site to build this project on. It happens to be in a location where the traffic is a really big issue, right? So what we're trying to look at is what is the impact of your potentially not providing enough parking here, right? It's not a seeker question. It's an urban impact question that's going to the findings essentially for a special permit, which is it going to have a negative impact on sort of the functioning and development and use of the neighborhood, right? And we know that people are triple parked. We know that the traffic is really bad. And the big concern is when people drive to this parking garage and they see there's a full sign there, and they're legitimately accessory parkers. They're not pomegranate parkers because we have a problem with them using it. They're not an accessory use. But they see it's a full sign, and they're going to go to that retail use in that building, in your building, or they're going to go to the doctor's office, and there's a full sign because there's a miscalculation on the need. What happens? They add to the triple parking. They add to the standing at the traffic light waiting to go to drive around the block. That's what we're trying to understand. So you need to be using the worst case scenario. So for instance, the Marshall scenario of more parking usage, more demand than maybe this neighborhood has. So the Marshall scenario plus this ambulatory center scenario, those two parking demand and traffic creation, trip creation sources, and combine them together. What you did is you picked and chose. You picked the highest for one and the lowest for the other, so they canceled each other out. We want to see both of them with the highest played out, and then what does that do when you introduce all those cars to this location, this intersection? And is there something, because for instance, you said in your report that you would take necessary measures. What are the necessary measures that you would take? Will you, have you contacted DOT to figure out how you might alleviate any problem? There's no question that, you know, your cars are going to pull in. You have really good reservoir space in this garage. The turntables work really fast. So you take that into account. You integrate what the parking garage expert said about how quickly they process the cars, and you integrate that with how many cars are coming to this lot to park there. And then where do the other ones go?
Okay, well, based on what I've seen, I'm not convinced that there are other ones. I know we've been through several iterations. We were asked to look at this from different ways of looking at this, so that maybe some of the, it wasn't picking and choosing on our part. I think it made us reflect that we've done this in a bunch of different ways in response to questions that we've received. The initial way we looked at this was to generate parking based on the industry standard Institute of Traffic Engineers parking generation manual. We adjusted that based on local census data. So that was our attempt to generate site-specific projection of parking demand for example, the office, the medical office, and the nonprofit institution uses. Then, as a reality check, we checked it against a recently approved and constructed project, which is basically on the other side of Washington Cemetery from here on Bay Parkway, which was also an ambulatory health facilities use. And we did the parking survey there. It turned out that there we were a little bit overcautious on our original analysis. The parking generation at that site was a little bit less than what we had originally come up with for this site based on the ITE and the local census data. It was fairly close, but we were actually a little bit we were more conservative in our initial approach, our site-specific approach, using local census data. With regard to the destination retail and the local retail, neither of which we're seeking a reduction in parking for, we were using the Coney Island FEIS. I'd be happy to append the relevant pages, like the seeker number, et cetera, which to me seemed like the most reliable data source. And again, as a reality check, we went out and did the survey, the parking survey of the marshals at Sheepshead Bay. And I understand there were some questions about, why aren't more people parking there? I don't know. I mean, the numbers are what they are. This is field data. We really can't.
I know this is hard for you because you think seeker all the time, but this is not a seeker question. This is a neighborhood impact question. So if you could take what you learned, what you know about parking, about traffic. You know that at Marshall's, it had a high demand rate. You said 52% auto usage rate around Marshall's. You take that 52% auto usage rate, which produces however many people making trips to go to Marshall's, and you apply that trip analysis to this site. Then you do this, you don't use the Brooklyn surgery site trip analysis because it's producing fewer trips. You use our site analysis because it's producing more trips, and you say how many people are going to be coming to this ambulatory care center, and at what times are their peak times, because you also have in your data conflicting times. On the one hand, you say that it's kind of between noon and 2 where the peak traffic demand is, the trip demand is, but then on the other hand, there is something else that says there's a peak retail parking demand at between 4 and 5 p.m. So that makes a very big difference, because if you look at the Pomegranate store, their peak demand is sort of in the afternoons on Thursday. On Thursday. So it sounds like, based on the data that you gave, you're coming up right exactly at the time when all those people from Pomegranate are hitting the intersection, and now all of your parkers are coming in or coming out of the parking garage, and they're entering into the traffic, and that's having an impact. And so normally what I'm used to seeing, frankly, is that someone goes to the intersection and sees what the trips are, what the demand on the intersection is. And, and we find out what kind of a rated intersection, it's a C section, it's a D intersection, whatever. And, and you try to avoid creating an F intersection, which means nobody goes anywhere, right? What we're trying to do is avoid creating an F, right? Or maybe even a D, because I don't know what it is, right? And so, so rather than get all wrapped up in, whatever the outside statistics are and the standard, I don't know what, you've got an actual location here that you have to admit is plagued with traffic. And what we need to know is that this garage is going to handle the amount of cars that are going to come there, and that when they exit, they're not going to have a really negative impact on movement within this area, make it way worse.
Okay, there are a number of things I'd like to respond to there. First of all, with regard to the 52% mode that I referenced for Marshall's, that was maybe apparently I wasn't very clear that is the census number for reverse journey to work, for journeys to work in the Marshall Census District, as contrasted to our area, which has a 42%. In fact, those are work trips, those are not shopping trips. For shopping trips for our site, for the destination retail, the number per the Coney Island FEIS, which was our data source, is 59%. So we assume a higher mode share by car for the destination retail than we do for the local people who come to work, people who work in the building or in the area.
Could I ask you that? It says, I thought the modal split was 54% by subway.
Yeah, it says 16% for auto.
But I was going to question that because
there was an error.
Where is there a subway near here?
The nearest subway is Avenue J.
Which is what?
I'm sorry. I guess the Avenue M train. The Avenue M is between 15th and 16th. Yeah, the J is about the same distance to the Brighton line. The Q train has local stops at Avenue J and at Avenue M between 15th and 16th.
How many blocks away is that?
About 5 short blocks and 1 long block.
Because it seemed like an aberration from the rest of
Okay,
the
no,
modal
that's
splits
60.
regarding the 54% for destination retail. I didn't know why that was so high.
No, that was, I said, that was an error. That was left over from an old spreadsheet. I apologize. The numbers,
Oh.
or actually, I said, the number was 59, which actually I looked back because I was concerned when I saw this. In the initial parking demand, we did have the correct number for destination retail it's 59 for destination
So
retail.
here's the thing. Just in your speaking, you are confusing us. And all of your submissions have confused us. And I ended up having to go through each one all at the same time. I said, oh, here's the EAS. This is the data. Here's the next submission. Here's the data. Doesn't look like that data, but let's keep reading. Here's the next submission. Here's new data. Here's the next submission, data. And I try to put them all together, and I can't because none of them match. And if you don't have a clear report that has a purpose, and I told you what the purpose is, which is simply, you're going to be introducing a lot of cars to this site. We know, according to one analysis, if that's the right analysis, between 126 and 199 trips will be happening at this site. You're going to be adding 200 cars to the traffic flow. Where are they going? What are they doing to the traffic flow? Do they have a place to park? All that stuff, right? It's as simple as that.
I
And in
agree.
one
A
clear
single
statement-
comprehensive submission rather than the.
Yes.
Would be
Where
fine.
all your numbers are checked, no mistakes permitted, because I'm going to give them right back to you, and we're going to start all over again.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Okay, now
Let me, because I'm also not a maven in this stuff. But the question is, we're not evaluating the addition of this 160,000 square foot building, because it's as of right. What the decision before the board, is whether to allow a 74 space reduction in the parking garage.
Right.
So that's the issue. We're comparing the full-size parking garage to the reduced parking garage with the same uses and the same floor
Well,
area.
actually, no, I would say the proposed parking garage to the full amount of parking that you would have had on the site had you just complied.
Exactly.
Had you dug another level and gotten 3 levels of stackers in there, right?
Well, you say if we had fully complied, but let's think about this, because that confuses me a little.
Okay.
We're not going to fully comply. That's not in the cards. The water table is right.
No, I'm not saying
Oh.
that's what you're going to do. I'm actually, in real life, I'm saying that if you hadn't come here, you would have, and you didn't have a water table problem, you would go down another, whatever it is, 8 feet, and then you could have a 3-level stacker, and then you'd be done, right?
You'd
You
have
enough cars.
74 more spaces.
74 more spaces. So you're going to have an analysis with 74 more spaces provided, what that does to everything, and then the analysis for the proposed, what that does to everything, using real-life data about this location, taking an extreme, because this is an extreme location, and, and bumping all the numbers up to reflect the fact that this is an extreme location.
You want to, in the vernacular, you want us to use conservative assumptions.
There you go.
Across the board.
Worst case
Worst
scenario
case,
kind of
right,
thing, in
okay.
the seeker language.
Okay, Jim will correct me if I'm wrong, but we have, in essence, done that. And what we have found is even at the reduced number, there is leftover parking.
Right,
It's
that's
not,
with respect to the parking.
right, with the parking.
Whether or not you've actually made that case, because again, I'm not clear that you made that case because it's so hard to understand submissions.
Okay.
But the other part of it really is about traffic impacts. Because if you could whisk the cars there magically, it's a much different question than the fact that they have to drive up and pull into that reservoir space and they have to exit.
So you want the real traffic, real projected traffic impacts using conservative assumptions based on 2 garage scenarios.
There you go.
Okay, you got it?
I believe so. I mean, I'm trying very hard not to be dense here, but I'm genuinely, if we are talking about the same 160,000 square feet of uses, the same amount of each of the constituent uses, those uses in that floor area is what generates
No,
traffic.
we're not doing that. We're keeping with the same uses.
Okay.
Same amount of floor area.
Yes.
One is a complying building with a deeper cellar that gets a triple stacker.
Understood. So
and one is the one that you're proposing.
in which case, the delta between the two projects is 74 parking spaces.
Correct.
Right.
Those
Again, you're
74.
thinking like a seeker guy. Stop doing that.
Okay, but I'm just trying to.
I've been doing it his whole life.
No, I'm just trying to understand. I mean, it's my understanding that it's the medical uses, it's the destination retail, et cetera. Those are what generate activity. Those are what generate either pedestrian traffic, vehicular traffic, et cetera.
So that's why we
And,
want
and
to
there's
keep
and those are the same. So I mean,
Yes.
if I would believe, and it's my belief. I don't think I'm out of line
However,
here.
if you're not,
The
if
amount
you're
of-
finding that you need more parking spaces and everybody's coming and going really easily on one scenario, whereas the other ones have backup and maybe there's a little bit of people standing on line to get in during these peak hours, that's why the traffic matters.
No, I would agree.
Because at peak hour, I'm standing there waiting to pull into the parking garage. And if there's a lot more of me than we thought, then I'm causing huge traffic impact. That's what this is about.
I would agree. If we had inadequate parking under the reduced space, the 272 spaces, yes, that would be a problem. And, you know.
It's not just that, it's the traffic. You need to make a connection between traffic and parking. They go on at the same time.
Understood.
How does the traffic change, though, if the square footage remains the same in the building?
It's simply that if the peak trip demand is, say, 4 o'clock on a Thursday, where Pomegranate is really, really intensely active, then all the 199 trips are happening within that hour for our parking garage, and we don't have enough place to put everybody, because we can't get it going fast enough.
Okay.
That's
So-
the thing. Do
so-
we need another turntable? Do we need, right?
So you want us to use the worst hour with the most
That would be the
traffic?
simplest, yeah.
Right, with the most traffic. And the modal splits and all the other things, the most conservative.
Right.
And then compare the two projects.
There you
One with full garage, one with a small garage.
There you go.
I think we could do that.
I think so. And Ryan?
And it's both easier and harder than a seeker thing. We're not asking you to do seeker, but in the way that it is easier is that you're saying, okay, there's 74 spaces that may not have in the sort of with action scenario, and if those maybe your garage has capacity for all the demand, even without those, maybe, right? If it doesn't, then you say, okay, well, we also know that there's other parking resources, so even if cars come and it's a full thing, they can go and find parking. They're not going to circle the block, or if they did circle the block, they're not going to then snarl an intersection right there. And you don't even have to say, like, do a full-blown analysis for that. You can just sort of suggest, like, oh, it's like a small number of cars. We can just think. And because it is findings for a special permit and not a seeker threshold, you can say things like, this is a wide street. There is, parking here, or there's not parking, and so people can make left turns. You can give a more qualitative analysis, and I think that would also be good to both. There's like this report that's technical, and I think it would be good if it also lived in your findings,
Yes.
so that people can just read it and not have to look through it.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, that'd be great, Howard, if you could put it
The
in
other
right.
issue you raised was DOT, which I think we'd like to respond to as well.
Well, first of all, I would note that the way our building is laid out now, there is one entrance. It's an entrance only from Coney Island Avenue, from southbound Coney Island Avenue, since we're on the east side of the street. There is one exit, which is onto Avenue L, east of Coney Island Avenue. Therefore, our cars come in from the north on Coney Island Avenue, and then they leave on Avenue L. They don't actually go through the congested intersection of Avenue L and Coney Island Avenue. And I would note that Coney Island Avenue is a double yellow, so you're not allowed to make a northbound left turn mid-block across a double yellow. We hope that at least most motorists comply with the law, and if they don't, maybe a horn honking will remind them, enforcement will remind them. In extreme measures, which is extreme, so I've only seen it in a handful of places, the city has actually put these sort of bendable bollards down along the double yellow. I would imagine DOT is reluctant to do that and probably makes snow plowing a real chore, and if you have emergency vehicles trying to maneuver, et cetera. They don't do it in very many. I can only think of a handful of situations where I've actually seen this, one of which happens to be across the street at Pomegranate, but it's a rare measure. I think the most likely, most appropriate way to ensure that people follow the law is, there's a double yellow line there. If you need to enforce it, you can write some tickets, give people moving violations. That ought to get the message across pretty quickly. We'd be happy to have those conversations with DOT. I'm sure that they would not commit to any measures. What they usually do is they're operational people. They take seeker with a grain of salt, as they should. They say, when you're up and running, come back, tell us what the situation is in real life, not through your analyst projections, and we will do what's appropriate. But we're happy to begin those conversations with them before.
You know what would be helpful, because a lot of this is kind of trying to imagine impact, is if there was a site plan that showed the relationship between your building and the Pomegranate and where the traffic loads are for the Pomegranate, how it piles up at that peak time, and when your car turns into the driveway and when it exits the driveway, you're saying that basically the building avoids it entirely. That would make it a very long building, I'm thinking. So if you could visually represent how you're not adding to the clog. Okay. Anybody else? Any speakers on this item? Okay. So, what do we say?
We will take another stab at this.
Okay. Work together, please. Make sure that he's doing what you know he should be
If
doing.
he can explain it to me, then it will be understandable.
Okay. So you think you could make a submission on January 6th?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
The answer is
for-
yes.
It could also be the 13th, because we don't have a hearing on the 20th. Would the 13th be better?
Yes. If it gets the same hearing date, then sure.
Yeah, same hearing date, the 27th for the hearing.
Okay, so submit January 13th, hearing January 27th.
Right.
Okay?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 26, 329 13BZ, 145 Gerard Street. This is an adjournment request.
Okay. Is anyone here on this one? No. Okay, so we were asked to adjourn this for a submission date on 1/27, so we could have the hearing on February 10th.
Item number 27, 8-14BZ, 1824 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
Good evening, Lear Altman, the law office of Lear Altman. We did attend.
You're still here?
Since 10 a.m. We did attend your executive session yesterday. I attended your executive session yesterday. I heard your comments. I've been speaking with the architect. We clearly need to have some further discussions, the architect and I.
Yes, please. So you'll do that?
Absolutely.
That'll make it a lot easier. We would also like to get on with our lives, right?
Understood. I know the client would more than any of us.
Okay.
And this is the one where I mentioned the TPPN regarding.
Correct. That's one of the things we're going to
Okay.
confirm.
And the front yard landscaping.
I did hear that as well, and I will be confirming it. I do see what you're talking about on the left side of the home. There's a little
Yeah,
portion.
right.
But if you read that section, it actually says, or the prolongation, and the wall is behind that piece.
Well, prolongation to me means along the street wall when I read that.
The street wall actually, if you look
The
at the
street
shape.
wall or its prolongation to me
Tell me.
means in a direction parallel to the street.
Well, the building has a street.
I don't read it that way.
It'd be better if actually my pencil was working. It's like, not exactly a straight line, but it actually does this. And so typically DOB has permitted us to consider the prolongation of whatever the wall is. So if it's here, it's here. If the building sets back like that, prolongation is here.
But it's not in the front
Prolongation of whatever
yard.
the piece is that's adjacent to the side yard is what they've allowed us to use as a determining factor for calculations. So the calculation, that piece was set back, but also the calculation of the size of the front yard included that piece. So if you want us to only count the piece off of the main front wall, we can certainly do that. But if we do that, it'll also reduce the amount that's required because the size of the front yard is going to be reduced.
Right. Okay.
So If you'd like to see the calculation done the other way, we'll be happy to do it. This was done the way we've typically been doing it with DOB.
Well, I don't recall seeing it extending beyond the front yard. I've seen where it's not complying, and then where the complying front yard is, including that piece, but not in the piece beyond.
It's only if a lot of times the building doesn't have a piece that sets back. This one just so happens on the left side when you're looking at it from the street.
It has a
have a
little
piece that
street
sets
wall.
back. That's exactly why the DOB was allowing us. But again, if you'd like to see it calculated the other way, we certainly could do so.
Yeah, I would think it would be better.
Okay, it will reduce, though, as I said, the requirement in addition to what we're
you
providing.
still have a
Because it's going to be the same 30%, it's just 30% of a smaller space.
Right, but you're still going to count the front yard in that that area that's not encroaching.
We will count everything in front of the main front wall of the building, is what it seems like you're asking for.
Yes. The entire, there's a non-complying front yard, then there's a portion that has a complying front yard.
Correct.
So in front of both of those portions, you'll calculate whatever that front
Okay,
yard
so
is.
you want in front of the complying and the
And the
non-complying.
non-complying, right.
Front yard. You don't just want us to take the front street wall, which is the non-complying portion.
Right.
Okay, understood. We can do that.
Okay.
Let me just make a note.
Okay, any other questions? No? Any speakers on this item? So, a little bit of work by the architect, what are we thinking time-wise?
If we could get on January 13th, I think the client will get him to take care of this prior to that.
Okay, so if it's on January 13th hearing, is that okay? Yeah. Then that would be a submission by the 30th, is that okay?
Absolutely.
You sure? I don't know, can't speak for your architect's schedule.
I was going to say, I was pushing him yesterday on the phone, not as hard as the client is about to.
Okay. Okay, so, all right, so submission on the 30th for a hearing on the 13th.
Please.
And just wanted to say thank you for the photo streetscape and the yard plan. That really helps, the yard photographs. It really helps to understand what's going on.
Absolutely. The photo streetscape, as you saw, was not done by the architect this time. It is not something that his office does, so it is something that we brought in Urban Cartographics to do.
Great, okay. And then, just the pointer to the architect, a little bit, trying something like a SketchUp program or something like that to help in depicting the project, because at the moment, he's working at a disservice to himself because he can't really represent his project to fit within context. And so it's we have to interpolate, like, there's the project flying in this kind of poor axonometric and then we have to imagine it inserted onto the block. And if he just would learn some of these techniques, if he's going to be working on these kinds of projects a lot, it would help you a lot, it would help the client a lot.
I will speak to him about that. I know he's still hand drawing and he has somebody who's doing the CAD for him.
Oh, well, he has someone doing the CAD,
He
then
has
they can
somebody doing
definitely
the
do
CAD.
it. Especially if the person's
Well, they weren't
like
able to
20.
do that. The person was not able to, he's not 20. The person was not able to do that when it came time to do the photo streetscape. That's why we brought in Urban Cartographics.
Okay.
But I will speak to him about it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next.
Item number 29, 2614BZ, 45 East 75th Street, Manhattan, Frank Angelino.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Frank Angelino on behalf of the U at School.
Hi. I don't think we had any more comments on this.
Right.
It's a simple little, very modest proposal. Are there any speakers on this item? I'm okay to close and vote on this, actually. What?
Oh, you want to set a decision date for 1/6?
What?
Decision date for 1/6?
Oh, why don't we just do it? What else? We don't expect to have anything, right? Nothing's open.
12/16, we just, in terms of getting the decision written. It would be
Oh,
better
we
for
have to write the
1/6.
decision.
Yeah.
Okay, too bad. Okay. Okay, so we can close this, or a motion to close.
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Ms. Sharpley Brown?
Aye. For a decision on January 6th.
Thank you very much.
All right? That's fine.
Item number 30, 2814BZ, 3540 Nostrand Avenue, Brooklyn.
Eric Palatnik, very quick, requesting an adjournment.
Yay. When would you like to?
A couple weeks after the New Year's would be fine. I forget what dates you had, the third week or so of
let me
January.
just check, I haven't overdone it on this one. 1, 2, there's like, I added only 3. Okay, so we could have a submission on the 13th for a hearing on the 27th?
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 31, 5914BZ, 114-122 Jackson Street, Brooklyn.
Is there anyone here for this? Howard. Howard. I see Carrie's name.
For the applicant, Goldman Harris, we've asked for an adjournment of this matter.
Okay, so you wanted to adjourn for submission on January 6th? Was
Yeah.
that what you wanted to do?
I will accept that.
Okay, you'll accept that.
I will exercise my authority.
Okay, so you could also, and then
Actual or
opposition would submit on the 20th? Or, yeah. Opposition submits on the 20th, and then you could have a reply on the 3rd of February? Does that
Okay.
sound good? For a hearing on, unfortunately, if we do it like that, the 24th of February. Is that terrible?
It actually is terrible.
Terrible. So let's go back. So if you submitted on the 6th, opposition submits on the 20th. You submit on the 27th. Could you do that?
Yes?
Then we could have a hearing on the 10th of February.
6/20/27/10.
There you go.
Thank you.
Item number 32, 6414BZ, 1320 East 23rd Street, Brooklyn.
Hello again, Mira Altman from the Law Office of Mira Altman. Once again, same architect. We are speaking with the architect and working on this application as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. So same schedule?
Please.
Same, yes?
Please.
So what did we say?
12:30, 113.
Okay. 12:30, 113. Good. Okay.
1230, 113, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No speakers, right? Okay. Item number 33, 9114BZ, 3420 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn.
You wanted to adjourn this, is that correct?
Please.
Yes, so,
The request was for January 13th, please.
right, let me just see, we're doing the same kind of thing. So now we're filling ourselves up. I actually think that we might need to move this a little later. It's too many, I'm thinking, no? Or we're still good? No, maybe we're still good. One really big one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we can handle it on the 13th then.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so submission
Same as
on the
before.
30th. It's the same architect doing all this work?
This one, no, this is somebody else. This is,
They're going to be mad at you, okay.
oh, believe me, he's already mad at me. The last one's already mad.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Item
Thank
number
you very much.
34.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Item number 34, 11414BZ, 2442 East 14th Street, Brooklyn.
Happy holidays. Don't we still have a couple of weeks left?
But she's thinking she's not coming.
She's quick.
She's gone.
She's gone. She's already there in her head. Hi, Eric Palatnik. We attended your review session yesterday, and we can certainly give your board some more information to show you how the rear yard, how it fits within the character. I think we explained at the last hearing how the homes on either side of it stick out in the back, and we can give you some more plan sheets, I think, to show you more clearly that the rear enlargement really is not hindering anybody.
So if you speak to Urban Cartographics, they already know how to do this now.
Yes, I know. I've been
So,
speaking to
right?
them. Yeah, no.
So they're block plans, and we want to see what the depth of the yards are on the block, but in particular in this case, because you're building so far into, I mean, there's a super deep rear yard, and the neighbors seem to have a super deep rear yard, and you're building this 42-foot long extension, so you really need to justify kind of what the impact is going to be on those neighbors.
We'll give you more of a study. I just sculpted out of the file what you already have in your files,
Yes.
but on this point,
Lotuses?
that could just perhaps give the board a little more comfort in their decision, but we'll give you some dimensioned drawings also from the architect with more dimensions. But obviously, there are two photos from the rear and then the radius diagram. The photos in the radius diagram in conjunction with another show you that the homes to the left of the property, when looking at it from the front, starting at 2446 East 14th Street, are all semi-detached homes, 3 stories in height, that have their rear yards starting pretty much at approximately the same distance that our rear yard will be. They might even be a little bit smaller than ours by the time we're done enlarging. Similarly, with the photograph that we just showed you, that we handed up, the very first top cover page, you could see that the home on the right of us sticks out far behind us. So I think what we've been trying to depict, and maybe we should wrap it all into one smooth submission for your board, is that the homes on either side of it both already have much shorter rear yards than we do. And when we're reducing the depth of our rear yard, we're really becoming very much in continuity, specifically with the homes to the left of us. And it'll be a little deeper than the home to the right of us. And nonetheless, our overall rear yard is still much greater than is even authorized under the special permit, which is a 20-foot.
Not about what's authorized, it's what finding that you can make.
Right.
That it's consistent with neighborhood character, right? And so, this map is the beginning of it, but since it's the same consultant, they now know that they can.
Right, we'll
enlarge
change
this
it and
put
we'll add it.
dimensions, And then we have some real data to work with. And then the other thing that Ms. Altman did, which was very helpful, was standing in the rear yard and doing a
360
radius,
spin around.
360, and then you understand what the conditions around the neighbors are, right?
We'd be happy to get that for you, and I think we can give that to you. It'll demonstrate what we're trying to prove.
Great. Okay. Any other comments on this?
Well, just from your first floor plan, it looks like the attached houses to the left actually probably have a complying 30-foot rear yard.
Yeah.
From the houses to the left of us. They may very well be, but they are set back quite
Compared to
further
you,
on the
but
lot.
you have to justify your 25-foot your rear yard.
Well, the special permit is put in place to achieve this 20-foot rear yard. So of course, nobody, the character of the block front, it's sort of like a cyclical thing, chicken and an egg. I can't have a 20-foot rear yard coming here unless everybody else on the block has a 20-foot rear yard, but nobody can get a 20-foot rear yard unless they come here.
But actually,
So
that's
I have a
the
homeowner
neighborhood
sitting right
character.
here who's looking at me, I could feel him looking at me saying, well, they didn't come to the board yet for a special permit, so of course they don't have a 20-foot rear yard. So how can I?
It's not a 20-foot rear yard, it's a rear yard reduction that's
Right.
permitted by the special permit.
Right, but how can I ever get, under the logic that's being presented to me, I'll never be able to prove to you that a 20-foot rear yard is in context with the neighborhood unless I'm the last person in the community and the last person on earth that's decided to enlarge on this block.
Well, why would the special permit have a neighborhood character finding if you're not supposed to look at neighborhood character?
I'm not saying you're not supposed to look at neighborhood character, but I think what I'm hearing is prove to me that the other rear yards are also at the same depth that you're looking to go to, when it's impossible for them to be there, because if they were built pursuant to the 1961 zoning resolution, they would have to have a complying rear yard of 30 feet. So how can I possibly ever prove to you that my 25-foot rear yard is keeping with the character of the neighborhood?
Oh, it's 25 foot now, right?
It's 20, it's been 25 the whole time.
Oh, it's 25 for the whole time. Okay, so you just need to give us some data, and then we can look at it.
No, I'm with you, but I'm going to a broader question.
Hypothetical.
We're going to this broader question of how the board is positioning the review. Once you look at it, you're probably going to see what Commissioner Montanez just did by dimensioning it up, and you're going to see the other yards around us are larger than the proposed yard. So how do I advise the homeowner of what I would need to show to the board in order for them to get
Well,
to what is in a special permit?
So the other thing is, this is a 42-foot-long extension that's violating side yard regulations
Right,
also
right.
significantly, right? The house is it's 3 foot 8 inches from the adjoining property, never mind the property line,
Right, but they all are.
So, this is a special permit that entitles the board, to consider whether it varies a bunch of bulk regulations, right? It doesn't have to vary all of them. It can vary some of them. It can vary one of them. And it's based on an analysis that has to do with character. And the fact that you're that close to your neighboring property, the building, would give one pause, right? But you have such a narrow sight that one questions, like, what in the world could you do there? And it becomes a house that's just a staircase.
Right, and that's pretty much the condition though up and down the block. They're all on top of each other.
Okay, so that way, that's the first variance that you're asking for, is to waive, the first waiver is a very significant one. Building within the side yard setback, having a real imposition on the neighbors, continuing that imposition, right? So that's one question that's looked at. And the next question is looked at in this case is what happens to the rear yard? And you have to look at each one. And then you have to look at, yes, but the special permit is designed to allow people to expand their houses so they can grow their families and all that stuff, right?
Right.
So you look at, if we said, no, but you have to maintain the 30-foot rear yard, just for argument's sake, but you could still maintain your 3'8" distance from the adjoining property, which is way less than what's permitted by the zoning and lots of other things, we'd still be enabling the family to grow, the family to stay.
I
et cetera, et
respectfully
cetera.
disagree with Madam Chair. I know the power that's vested in you, and obviously you're the chair, and I'm very respectful of it. But the analysis that's occurring is having such a chilling effect on the special permit, and is scaring the bejesus out of the homeowners, to the point that I have an applicant here, a homeowner here, he's in the audience with you here today. He's got kids, he's got a family. He bought this house a year ago. It was flooded during Sandy. He's trying to rebuild it. The neighborhood, the blocks had previous approvals on it. The neighborhood is very densely populated with houses very much right on one on top of each other over and over and over again. And the special permit gives the ability for him to enlarge, and here he's even doing it modestly, not as much as even other people do it. And he's going to come out of here scared to his bones, because the investments he's made for his family from this conversation doesn't look like it's anywhere near a guarantee, and it looks like the board is of the inkling that maybe if our submission's not good enough, his house will have to come to an as-of-right 20-foot rear yard. Now, that might not be anything for the board, who's 5 o'clock in the day, you're 15, 25 cases into today, and much of them have been much bigger than his investment, but for him, it's the biggest investment of his lifetime, and that 5 feet is the whole reason he's here. So
No, actually, it's the 3'8" on the side yard.
it's both. It's both. They're both here he's here for both of them. And this is one where the homeowner's not enlarging the house, on other discussions where we've had, where the home is not going anywhere near the maximum permitted height. The home is not being raised due to Sandy flood regulations. It's already a 2-story home.
Okay, Mr. Palatnik,
yes.
I just have to ask you.
Yes.
Give us this data.
I will, but I'm
Okay,
more...
stop making an argument that you don't know is needed to be made
I'm
until you
more-
give us the data.
I know, but I'm more talking, since we are at the end of the calendar, and it's been a long day, and this issue is coming up over and over again. I'll give you the data on this. I'm just letting the board know, you're all human beings. The people that are coming before you in these special permit home applications have their lives invested in these properties. And the nerves that are on the other side aren't like a private developer where maybe they're going to make X million dollars or Y million, or maybe they're going to get this or that. These are people's lives. And the discussions that we're having are scaring people to the point that they're not able to sleep at night. And I just was hoping that the board could just see that when they are coming in, maybe try to find a way to give us a little more certainty in the application process as we're all getting used to things as we're moving ahead,
Well, this
so
is-
that we
yeah.
can communicate with
Mhm.
a lot of people are in the mill, so to speak, already. So you're coming in halfway, and they're halfway, so it's just catching them very off guard. The newer applications, we have the opportunity to communicate with people, but I just wanted to give my client the confidence so that he can go home to his wife tonight and his family and say, it looks like we're okay, it looks like we'll be able to start work. Not with this, Palatnik's got to prove that my 25-foot, and I will prove it. And I'll give you everything you need, but I just want the board to know it is having a very
But
scary
just to
effect.
make this very clear, the special permit is not an entitlement. It's something that it's where you have to establish the findings. I need to make that clear. You have to meet
Yes,
the
but
findings.
on a side note, not related to his case,
Yes.
I disagree with that. There is legislative court actions on special permits that state very clearly that a special permit is a legislative finding that's similar to an as-of-right development, and it should be given much much greater deference than a variance type of application. It's the legislature has already looked at the process and already determined what should be allowed. And those guidelines of a special permit, I'm just concerned that we're starting to get so loose into this neighborhood character finding that we are losing a lot of the point that it's a special permit that we're here for, not a variance. And the idea of the special permit is that the legislature is studying these concerns before it's coming here to take the burden off of the board. And it just seems like we're going right.
When did the legislature study the concerns about neighborhood character on this house, on this block? When did that happen?
When the special permit was enacted, the background of the special permit, which we could give you the legislative history of it, was all about how the neighborhoods are evolving and the families need to stay in these neighborhoods and they want the neighborhoods to change. They recognize that it's going to allow larger homes, but the recognition of that is worthy in exchange for keeping the families that are paying into the tax base and have jobs and businesses here for people to stay employed and for the city to generate a tax base.
Was there an environmental impact statement done on this special permit?
I don't know if there was an
There
environmental
wasn't,
impact
because
statement done on the.
Each analysis was supposed to look at neighborhood character independently, and notably, it's a type 2 action. So what do? There's no environmental analysis at all.
I understand.
So that means that we have to do the analysis because no one else did, and we have to do the analysis one house at a time.
I understand.
And it's not that every house is entitled to the same thing. It depends on the situation, it depends on the location, it depends.
I
It's
understand.
not an entitlement.
I understand to a certain.
You have to take that back to your clients.
I will. We are
It's
taking
not
it
an
back.
entitlement.
No, everybody's getting the message loud and clear. Everybody's gotten the attention on it. I
Okay.
mean, everybody is talking about it. But I just was hoping for this client, at least, he has some certainty he can go to bed
Okay,
tonight.
so
knowing
submit
what
the
we'll-
materials
We'll give you the rear
quickly,
yard.
and you'll have more certainty if you submit the materials.
We're going to submit them really quickly. It was just going to be
Okay.
you remember what it's like when you have clients. You have to advise clients and tell them what they can expect. The one question I would hope the board could entertain us with would be if we could close hearings on the matter, and should the board be satisfied with everything, if you could issue a decision at the next hearing, or you could reopen, that would give Mr. Vaisbert a little quicker of a,
If we close, we can't deliberate, and we have to deliberate, so I don't think that works.
okay, if you could leave it open potentially for a decision on the next hearing date?
If we can, we could potentially
Potentially.
close and vote on the next hearing, given the materials, potentially.
We're just trying to,
Right.
again, my whole mission when I work with it's a special permanent home enlargements, I'm trying to make it easier for
Yes.
the homeowner, that's all.
It's all the more incentive for you to give us a really good submission.
We'll get you a fantastic submission that'll show you the dimensions of all the rear yards all around us with all the pictures. I know what you're looking for. I'm sorry to divert into the larger discussion, which I'm sure we'll have
No,
more of.
it's an important discussion to have.
Unfortunately, it is. There's a lot of people who have a lot at stake with it, so thank you very much for entertaining me with it.
Thank you. So, no speakers on this item, I don't see any. Okay, so if you could, when can you submit?
We could submit next week.
Next week, so the thing is, though, that
We'll
unfortunately.
submit 2 weeks, you're filled up.
Yeah, 30th, could we do this on the 6th? That would be, I think we could do this on the 6th, because it's little. Okay, yeah, we could have a hearing on the 6th.
Thank you, thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last but not least, totally not least, thank you for
New
waiting.
cases, item number 1, 18314 BZ, 113 Nassau Street, Manhattan.
Good afternoon or evening, Todd Dale for the applicant. Two quick things from review session. First, there is definitely a typo on page 3 of the statement. As the board knows, we handle many of these applications. Some of that information got transposed. We'll get a fixed statement to you. Second issue that came up was regarding the sound. Just to clarify, in the notice of comments response, our response was based on the fact that the board had previously, at least through our application, continuously, when there was an instance where there was no adjacent residential use, not required a sound note or explanation around sound attenuation measures. In certain instances, we actually had it requested of us to take the sound note off because it wasn't adjacent to a residential. And in this particular instance, this seemed to meet those parameters. The proposed PCE on the first 3 floors is only adjacent to offices. These offices are also below an existing gym, so they're already located in a gym. So anyone being in those offices is dealing with a current gym,
hell.
something like that. Potentially. That said, the Equinox, which is affiliated with Blink, is a long-time experienced operator of PCEs in the city. They're very familiar with what needs to be done. We are more than willing to amend the plans. I actually have them already done with what was previously the standard note that the board has requested about the 45 dBA, sound measures in adjacent spaces. We can definitely put that on the plans and get it submitted, probably not today, but tomorrow.
Okay, that's, you know what, the issue is, we're learning some extreme stories, but one of them is, that's known, is that treadmills, which are on the third floor, and weightlifting equipment, which is also on the third floor, makes a lot of noise when it hits the ground, and it also creates vibration. So if you had an office above and you're trying to write, a brief or something like that, and all you're hearing all day is banging, you would move. So, and all we're talking about is normal separation, acoustical ceilings. It's kind of a standard thing that people do for construction anyway. And I think all the Equinox gyms have drop ceilings, so that kind of stuff.
Nope, understood.
Right.
And I just said, just to clarify, where our response was based on the previous pattern. I would also say, in this instance, Equinox has had and Blink have had, I would say, a fairly good reputation, and there are, this is not a situation where it's an existing facility where there are current complaints. But we'll definitely get that note. We'll get it submitted.
Great.
Tomorrow.
By statement of facts.
Okay.
And yes, both that, the statement and the plans.
So I think we can close this. Right?
Yep.
And there's no one in the audience to speak, so there can't be any speakers. And so for a motion to close?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye. Okay, and then you submit whenever you submit, and we can vote on the 6th, on January 6th.
Is that the next, that's
That's
fine.
the next hearing.
Perfect.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
otherwise it's too.
It's appreciated.
This concludes,
Thank you.
I'm sorry. This concludes the public hearing for December 9, 2014.
I'm within that hour. You said 5? I said 4:45. And what'd you say?
Oh, I
You said
lost.
4.
I'm the snack bringer.
You were
So,
4.
uh,
You
I said 5.